So you want me to tell you the story of my life?
Like I said, that's what I do. I interview people. I'm a collector of lives.
Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. This is the show where I go one-on-one with a creator, author, illustrator, publisher, or other mover and shaker in the world of tabletop games, video games, TV, movies, or any other area of the geekverse.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. You seem very interesting. This is where you live?
Yes, this is my home. Welcome.
So, what do you do?
I'm a vampire.
That's something I haven't heard before.
Guests have included individuals such as Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and even the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price.
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. I haven't gotten to talk to him yet, but maybe sometime in the future. But how about Brian Colin, the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG and sculptor of the world of Revelo monster busts? Mark Tassin, the creator of the world of Italtus, head of Mechanical Muse, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. I've spoken with Jeff Engelstein, game designer and former commentator on the Dice Tower. He and I got deep into the statistics, probability, and psychological function of dice in tabletop games. Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games and crowdfunder extraordinaire. He's published many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. I've spoken with Sydney Engelstein from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about what it really takes to publish a board game in today's environment and what it would take for you to get published if you were trying to get a publisher for your board game. I've spoken with Ajit George about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and his development of the Journey Through the Radiant Citadel Dungeons & Dragons book. Let's see, who else have I spoken to?
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne and the goddess of death.
Yes, I really appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. That was a great interview. I've also spoken with Cameron Pasha, a writer and novelist who's been working in Hollywood for over 20 years. His projects have included Emmy and Golden Globe nominated Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, and Roswell, New Mexico. His analysis and commentary have been very popular on YouTube. I've gotten to speak with Paul Shadow, the former network executive who has made quite a splash here on YouTube with his reaction videos to current movies and films. He and I discussed the status of independent film and web productions online today. Brianna De Silva is a reoccurring guest on the show and a very popular one at that. She's an author and director, and she was also the co-writer of the cultist comedy web show that's here on the channel. She and I regularly meet to study and analyze stories. I've also gotten to speak with of the Positive Fandom channel. She's an ally in our effort to be a positive and constructive force in the Geekverse. Are you ready? Have you got your drink? Are you all settled in? You might want to buckle up because it could be a wild ride. We're about to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and the Geekverse through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath Robinson. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Ahsoka. The first 2 episodes premiered last week, so we're going to talk about it right now. And I'm here with one of the favorites on the show, Douglas A. Burton, right here, who is a fan of Ahsoka, the character, right?
What's up, everybody?
He's gonna I've watched it as well, but he's a big fan of the character of Ahsoka, and so he wanted to be sure to be able to talk about this.
Oh yeah. I was actually very much looking forward to this show ever since I heard they were going to try to make it into a live action show. So, but what's up, everybody? Hi, James. Hi, Sable.
Yep, we've got James, we've got Sable in here, we've got Zero the Blade, we've got Tomocrat. We are broadcasting simultaneously on the Geekverse, Heath's Geekverse, and also the new dedicated Table Talk channel that I've been working on getting put up and things like this. So this is the new dedicated channel for this live stream. And so I know a lot of people are watching over there, so we can try to get its viewership up and its watch hours and things like that. And perhaps people recommending, or perhaps the algorithm recommending this stream to people who would be specifically interested in what we talk about. And so this has been a major project. I would put some shorts up over here too, and actually, Lou Anders talking about David Bowie inspiring the Dragon in Thrones and Bone series has gotten 1,800 views. It just went crazy. Like
Whoa!
hours ago.
It looks like 8,000 views.
It's 1.8 at 1.8.
Oh, okay, I see.
So yeah, if it were 8,000, that would be. But so that's been going on over here, and so this can be the home for all feelings on the stream. Doug, do you want to introduce yourself? I've got your book up right over here.
Yes, most of you probably know by now. I authored the historical fiction book called Faraway Bird that details the early life of Byzantine Empress Theodora. I am currently working on book 2, and I've been making great progress. And then in February of 2024, my book will come out that covers the Heroine's Labyrinth. I'm very excited about that, and Heath and many members on this channel have been a part of that process. So I look forward to that coming out, and I hope y'all can get the book and check it out.
All right, yeah, we've done tons of stuff on the Heroine's Labyrinth, and we will be we'll be doing even more, I'm sure, when it is released. You said when it was released? Did you say February?
February 2024.
All right. Well, do you want to introduce the show and what you said? You were a big fan of Ahsoka. Do you want to introduce the show and our conversation and get it started? I say that I did watch. I think I saw some of the Clone Wars. I think Lou was big on Rebels. He might have been the Clone Wars. I don't remember. He told me to go and watch them because he thought they were great Star Wars. And I remember that I did watch some of them. I don't know if I finished it all, but I know I saw some of Rebels because, okay, so this is where the characters come from. But I'm not sure if I saw it all, and it was a long time ago. So I know the character exists, but I didn't really follow all those. So I came in relatively fresh to Ahsoka on this. You're the expert, so.
So yeah, we're obviously in the Disney era, and that's a big deal because Ahsoka Tano really comes from the final effort of George Lucas. The Clone Wars animated series came out in 2008. In fact, it did not do well. I don't know how many people remember, but the Clone Wars animated series launched with a movie release. Dave Filoni released it as a movie. It was like an hour and a half, and it did terrible at the theaters. And I've seen the movie. It's not very good. It's hard to watch. Ahsoka Tano is introduced in this movie as a very teeny bopper Padawan to Anakin, and she calls him Sky Guy, and he's calling her Snips, and it just, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it was really bad. So I never really cared too much about the Clone Wars after I saw the movie, but I had heard that back in around 2010, 2011, I heard that the cartoon was actually very good. It was, at the time, this was before streaming, so it came out on the Cartoon Network. And I think my view today is that this really is disguised as a children's cartoon. The Clone Wars animated series, which heavily features Ahsoka Tano. She's a main character. And Anakin Skywalker, who is portrayed in the animated series as very heroic. I actually really liked him in the animated series because in the prequels, Anakin came across in Attack of the Clones as a little bit of like an emo, teeny kind of guy. I didn't really get the impression of him as being the future of Darth Vader in Attack of the Clones. Revenge of the Sith, I liked him much better. Revenge of the Sith, I still like as a movie. It's rewatchable. It's something that the prequels that I thought was very good. I actually have a very good opinion of Revenge of the Sith. But Anakin was always a little off, I felt. Like, could you imagine if they cast like Chris Hemsworth or someone big and imposing to play a Jedi Knight, and someone like Kenneth Branagh, an older, someone who doesn't seem about the same age as Anakin, someone who's a little bit older, that might have been the dynamic that would have worked. But as it was, my thoughts on Anakin were kind of hazy. So when I watched the Clone Wars animated series, and Anakin is heroic and a man of action and in charge and a smart mentor and, a good leader, and not at all, there was no emotionalism out of him. The voice actor did a great job. The animators were up to the task. And then you've got Ahsoka Tano, his Padawan. who, as the series went on, got better and better and better. And I'll just tell you, I'm a huge fan of the Clone Wars. The animated series itself is a little bit of a hybrid. Half of the episodes, roughly, are very children-like shows. Silly shows that I wouldn't recommend anyone to watch. An R2-D2 adventure of stealing fruit in an alien fruit basket in a princely setting on some planet. Dumb, like not good. There's a Jar Jar Binks episode. It got to the point where I had to start logging which episodes to skip. And I have an entire record of all the episodes I've watched and whether this is real Star Wars or little kid Star Wars. Little kid Star Wars you could skip. The real Star Wars episodes are some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen. So I'll just say that. It has some of the best action. The animation levels are unparalleled. It won many awards. It won many voice acting awards. And this show was going crazy. And Ahsoka Tano became front and center during the Clone Wars. So early in season 1, she moved from calling him Sky Guy and this little teeny bopper to someone a little bit more competent and serious as Anakin's Padawan. And the two had a chemistry. It was very strong mentor-student, mentor-pupil Jedi relationship. Anakin was a smart and compassionate mentor. He was a good mentor. There were several times I was like, man, Anakin strikes me as a really good Jedi in the Clone Wars, like the kind of guy that you're happy is on your side. And while watching, I remember thinking what a loss Anakin was to the good guys by watching. I never got that sense in watching the movies, but when you watch the Clone Wars animated series, you're like, this guy is a major front and center lead from the front hero. What a loss! What a loss Anakin was, and Ahsoka, his up and coming, got all of his wisdom and expertise passed on to him. She helped him at times. She saved his life a couple times in very good, convincing ways. And I became a rabid fan of the Clone Wars. I began to talk about it to everybody. I made one YouTube video in my life, really, and it was about Ahsoka Tano, where I make my case that she's one of the best Star Wars figures. So what happened? Disney bought the Lucasfilm in 2012, and they scrapped the Clone Wars. They canceled it. And what's crazy is that the Clone Wars was not tapering off in viewership. It was ramping up. So in season 5, it had the highest viewing. It was super popular. The word had started to spread, and that's when Disney canceled it. And that's when Disney, after 1 year, came out with Rebels as their replacement. And after the first season, Rebels was very so-so. It wasn't that great. The animation was a clear step down. To this day, I don't like the animation in Rebels. So the first season was really wonky. They brought in Dave Filoni. They brought in the team that did the Clone Wars, and he immediately reintroduced Ahsoka Tano into Rebels. And let me tell you, some of the episodes in Rebels were also way up at the top. They have an entire episode where Darth Vader comes in, voiced by James Earl Jones. Funny enough, he's on the planet that is in the first episodes of Ahsoka on Disney Plus. And he fights Ahsoka Tano eventually in the Rebels series. And it is a lightsaber battle with all the gravitas you could want. It's his former Padawan facing her old mentor who had turned to the dark side, Anakin Skywalker we're talking about. And they hash it out. It's just great stuff. I can't recommend it enough. Rebels steadily got better. They reintroduced Grand Admiral Thrawn into the Rebels show. And he's voiced so perfectly by the actor, I think the same actor who's playing him. Is that correct?
Mickelson, right?
Yes. He's incredible. And by the way, I have read, all the Timothy Zahn books. I have them all right here. I read them right when they came out. So I was very familiar with Grand Admiral Thrawn as a character, and he was a great character way back in the 90s when the world first met him. That's Mad's brother.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mad's brother. So that's what this is. Lars Mikkelsen, who's playing Grand Admiral Thrawn.
And as a voice, I strongly recommend most of the episodes of later seasons of Rebels, especially the ones with Grand Admiral Thrawn. The voice acting is impeccable. It's so good. Like, he is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Grand Admiral Thrawn is famous, for those of you who don't know, who haven't read the books, and he's blue-skinned. He's a Grand Admiral, so he wears a white Imperial uniform. He was a genius. He was at the Battle of Endor and survived. And according to the Timothy Zahn books, he took what's called the Imperial Remnant and rebuilt some semblance of a fighting military force and begins to attack the New Republic. And he's a very good opponent for the New Republic. And one of his things is he's not a Force user, Grand Admiral Thrawn. He is just a brilliant thinker. And when he goes to a planet, before he invades it, he studies the art, the poetry, and his chamber, like his captain's chamber or admiral's chamber on the Star Destroyer, is holograms of the planet's artwork. So he sits there with all these holograms floating around him, and he studies them, and he learns what the intelligent civilization fears most and what their weaknesses are based on their art, and he uses that to invade effectively. So he's a great villain. Well, Disney, who can't seem to get anything right, decided to take someone else's idea of a great villain and bring him in to Rebels, and they did a good job. So, as far as I'm concerned, Disney was riding the wave of kind of a lot of what came before, and they did release season 7 of the Clone Wars, and the final 4 episodes are some of the best Star Wars there is. Ahsoka Tano is one of the main characters of the final 4 episodes, and she had quit the Jedi Order, and she returns to the Jedi as an ally to help them with a problem on Mandalore. Darth Maul, who was reintroduced in season 3 of Clone Wars, who had survived, and his voice acting won awards. He was voiced so well. He returns, and he's taking over Mandalore, and the clone troopers, when they see their former commander return as an ally to help them with this issue on Mandalore, paint their clone armor in the orange face configuration of Ahsoka Tano. And I'll show you this is what it looks like. So there's an entire battalion of clones who painted their helmets like this, and as to honor their former commander. And it's funny because they're like, when they see her, they're like, it's good to see you again, Commander. And she goes, I'm not really a member of the Galactic Republic Order, so you can't call me Commander anymore. And he's like, you got it, Commander. Just great stuff. They really respect Ahsoka Tano. And yeah, isn't it pretty cool? So when I heard that they were going to do a live action version of Ahsoka Tano, I was jacked. So I'll just put that out there. I was not, I'm the perfect guy for this. I had gotten on board with the Clone Wars early. I watched every episode of the Clone Wars and every episode of Rebels. So I'm fully up to date. I heard on a lot of other YouTube channels, you have to have watched both of those shows in order to understand what's happening. I have, and I still was confused. So I'll just let you know, if you're confused, you're not. There's nothing wrong with you. So, but as the trailers came out, and as I have become, and Heath and most of the people on this channel, students of the Kathleen Kennedy administration of Lucasfilm and the Disney version of Star Wars, I had some concerns in the trailer. It looked very female-driven, very female-heavy, which that by itself doesn't bother me. But that in the hands of Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, it was a serious red flag for me. But the rest of it looked good, the trailer. And then last week, finally, Ahsoka Tano came out, and I got to watch the first 2 episodes. Heath, I think you said you saw the episodes as well.
I saw them last night.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
saw them last night.
So this is a perfect discussion. You have someone, Heath has not seen all of the, he doesn't have all that lore underneath. He's able to sit down and watch it, straight up. Like, he knows Star Wars through and through. So he's going to be able to give an opinion or a perspective of coming in, just raw into Ahsoka. And then I can add some commentary on what it's like to know it all as far as her storyline and, what I thought of it.
Sable Phoenix is adding a clarification. Was it true that Sable Phoenix says no Captain Palian or Palian Endor? Thrawn was in the outer region because he's an alien?
And the Emperor was a racist.
Do we have a fact? Yeah, and the Emperor was racist.
That might be right. I am loose on that canon. Thank you, Sable. If that is correct, I really appreciate that. I do know Captain Paleon was there. I remember, I think there's a flashback sequence or a discussion about that. And I think they even discussed why the battle turned against the Empire on that, as if analyzing tactical errors of the Battle of Endor and how the Empire should not have lost that, which is awesome to dramatize that.
Star Wars fact check. Was it?
That's good. He's. I mean, I trust Sable Phoenix to know that if they took the time to type it out.
Okay. Well, then I guess we start with the show. Now, I was thinking with this analysis as I was writing things down. Of course, we do a lot of structural analysis with movies and books and things like that. This is only the first 2 episodes. On the other hand, it's only 8 episodes. I think it's 8 episodes. I looked that up.
That sounds right.
So it's not like it's long anyway. So this is a quarter of the entire series run. So it's not an unsubstantial chunk of the episodes that we're going to get, but it is TV instead of movies, and it's the first quarter of it. So a lot of what I was writing down wasn't necessarily structural like we typically talk about.
Yeah.
But was more plot stuff. You know, we can talk about both, but we've been very structure heavy because we've been talking about that. That's been what we've been studying. But before I got heavy into the story structure things, I was very critical, would be very critical about movie plots and what is actually happening, you know, in the physical, actual, you know, this event leading to this event, leading to this event, the actual plot. And plot holes or things that just don't make sense. And so it seems like a lot of things that I wrote down had to do with that.
Yeah. Well, and you've heard me mention it on the channel before. I refer to something that I call functionality, where when you're putting a scene together, and you're a writer, Heath, so I know you instinctively understand this. And honestly, probably everyone in this chat understands what I'm talking about. You know, there's a certain functionality to a scene. You don't get a sense that the character's just in the room. You know, that character has a role in this society, and that role is part of why the character's there. And you know, you can unpack the scene and see how the puzzle pieces are fit. And a lot of times, a lack of functionality is the first is when you sense that there's something off in a scene and you begin to unpack it. 9 times out of 10, it's the functionality that's flawed. That the pieces don't fit together, and that's why the scene did not work. That happens all the time. I remember watching Aquaman, and there's these scenes of them in these underwater rooms, and they're floating and they're talking normally. I'm like, this has zero functionality. I don't know what that room is. It doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know why they're talking clearly underwater. Like, I could not unpack a single scene in Aquaman and with the sense that these people thought it out and made a functional society, a functional civilization. And then the scenes conveyed that. I didn't get that at all. So Ahsoka, the TV series or the streaming show, suffers a lot from problems in functionality.
I heard they were bringing the crawl back. So there was a crawl. We started with a crawl here.
Well, let's not call it a crawl because a crawl implies movement. This was more of like red font placed on screen, and then or I guess it does it move up?
I think it does move up. I think it slowly moves up. But I had heard, oh, really? They're going back to the crawl because that's been very controversial. And how iconic is it to Star Wars? And then it's removed from some things. And when is there going to be one? So I was like, oh, really? They're going to go a crawl again? I mean, but then it was a weird crawl.
Yeah. So, you know, I remember when Rogue One came out. I think that's the debate you're talking about. Should they do an opening crawl? I remember this debate taking place. And they decided to open up with this like alarming sound and zing, there's a planet. So they skipped it all altogether. Fine. But I think Star Wars, you should do something a little bit more to honor the spirit of what they're trying to do with the opening scroll. I thought the Clone Wars animated show had a great response. They opened every episode with a 30 to 45 second war propaganda piece where you would see all of this action and you'd be like, invasion, the Republic storms and it's this like propaganda voice in the background, but it's telling you important information that leads, and it goes, will Ahsoka Tano find her Jedi master? It gives you a background and leaves an open-ended question, and then you go into the episode. So that was a good variation of the opening scroll, in my opinion. Galaxy on fire. Droid invasion. It was really good. And they did it on every episode. What did you think, Heath? This was a scroll, I guess you could say.
Well, I wrote down strange crawl. Like, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, well, all right. So I guess they felt they needed it, or for whatever reason, but that it's doing something more traditional was not going to work for some reason. I know that they've said, didn't have it with Rogue One because they're like, that's a Skywalker thing, a Skywalker trilogy thing. So I could totally see doing some different kind of crawl, but that one just looked so incredibly basic. Like somebody had just put it together. Like you could have done something different with different fonts and said, hey, we're going to make a new type of scroll or crawl for this new series or for Ahsoka in general or whatever it is. I just thought it just looked so not thought about. It looked like, oh, we need something. And so we have this red text, and it didn't work.
Well, and even the opening scroll the letters are big and bold, and you have that incredible score playing, and you're out. It's part of the Star Wars experience. When you go to a movie theater to see a Star Wars movie on opening night, when that Star Wars thing hits, bing, and it fades off, and the opening scroll comes up, and it says Episode 5. Everyone's cheering. Like it's an event. That triggers so to have this small font, unbold, just sit there and kind of like, I don't know, like
no one
anyone
would cheer
could
for
do
that. No one would cheer for that.
Heath probably could have done one of those scrolls to introduce us tonight if he wanted.
I know. He probably should. That would have been funny. I should have thought about that.
Table Talk episode 56.
That would have been funny. I thought one of the best parts of the whole 2 episodes was the opening with the two, whether they're Sith or whatever they are.
They seem to be as far as I could tell, mercenary Force users of some kind, with Balon as an ex-Jedi. They did say he was an ex-Jedi.
Ex-Jedi.
I do agree with you. There was some appreciation for Star Wars, I guess, on a visceral level. On the opening, the opening took 6 minutes. I timed it. So you had 6. In fact, let me see what it ended up being exactly. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And there was a lot of action in it. And it was Star Wars action. You had lightsabers. You had the Force being used. You had X-Wings. No, you didn't have X-Wings yet. But you did open with a ship gliding through space. It looked like a Star Wars ship. It was moving at the right speed for me. So I agree with you. The opening 6 minutes, 40 seconds was probably the best part of both episodes. But it's a pretty flawed 6 minutes and 40 seconds when you break it down.
All right, do it.
Well,
I mean, we got some questionable actions on part of the captain.
I actually wrote down one of my. I'm going to remember as a writer. I'm going to remember this forever as an example of non sequitur dialogue. So non sequitur, and I'm sure everyone here knows, but for anyone who doesn't, it's an illogical sequence. So that's like if I'm like, Heath, your microphone's off. That means I got to go get the lasagna. It's 2 statements together that they're not sequential. It's non sequitur. And the captain, so there's the ship that comes in like a shuttle Tidarium type. And the captain goes, they're like, sir, it's a Jedi. It's an old Jedi clearance code. And we're supposed to be like, like, wow, that's mysterious, because the Jedi they're not back yet. They haven't returned after Return of the Jedi. Wait, or is this Ahsoka? This is after Return of the Jedi, right? Yeah, this is the New Republic. So the Jedi haven't returned, even though the last movie was Return of the Jedi. But it's an old Jedi code, and the captain says, "I'm calling their bluff. Signal them to come aboard."
Right.
That's in the script, and no one's thought that was a problem. If you're calling their bluff, you've made the right call. The next thing to do is to not let them on board.
Not have them on board. Yes. Right.
Okay, so, and I caught more the second time through. So they open up, and the reason they open on the ship that they did, which is a pretty cool looking, like New Republic version of a Star Destroyer. It's a little bit more curvaceous, and it's got the head and all that. But it's a transport ship for a dangerous prisoner named Elspeth, which sounds more like from a Jane Eyre novel, like English literature from England. She's their prisoner, and right away, I was like, "Where's your escort? Do you ever transport, even in today's society, a high-value target with an undefended transport? Like, it's beyond fathomable that this would be an undefended transport. And then, knowing you're undefended, like, let me put it this way, even in World War II, when we were sending Lend-Lease things over to England, we were knowingly sending them unprotected because we were neutral. We were not involved. And they were still at risk. So if you're traveling undefended and you have a high-value target, the approach of a ship is cause for alarm. This is cause for alarm. And then they get this weird, and the guy was
especially if you're
enough,
suspicious of it. We're going to call their bluff. There's something wrong with it, right?
and then the captain says there's something wrong with it, and I'm going to call their bluff. So you've got a captain way out ahead of it, only to then make the exact choice you would make if you weren't out ahead of this. Letting him on board means you trust him, that this is fine, that everything checks out.
And the captain walks down to talk to them.
Yeah, and I counted this time his security detail, 6 security guards, and they did not have their weapons drawn. They all had their weapons holstered. In fact, I laughed the second time I watched it. There's a scene where they start waving the lightsabers around, and one of the guys is like, still reaching for his gun. I'm like, man, these guys were just not the right guys to be security guards. Pretty rough to still not have that weapon drawn, 10 seconds into the battle, So
Picard and Riker would have handled that better.
Who would have?
Picard and Riker from Star Trek.
Totally. Picard would never have let him on. Like Captain Kirk. I mean, you think he would let them on the ship? He would have maybe beamed them aboard, or he probably would have just said no reply. No reply. Keep flying. What are they going to do? They're going to try to board us? I mean, what are they going to do? They're in a small shuttle. So
boarding party. Yeah, that's what James is talking about here. Yeah, are they going to board us? Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is to me all functionality issues. The logic of the captain doesn't make any sense. If you're calling their bluff, then you don't let them aboard. If you believe these guys, then you let them on board. And then the two people approach, and I did appreciate the image of Ray Stevenson's character Balon. He looks imposing. Mm-hmm. I wish he's not wasted in what appears to be bad script, but he felt like a menacing Jedi. Like, I would have loved it. I want to see more of him. He was intimidating, and even there's a scene where he's blocking laser bolts. He just moves his lightsaber just an inch or two to the side, and I'm like, that's how you block laser bolts. You're a guy under control, and he conveyed all that, and I really appreciated that presence in the show. Unfortunately, he's an island of presence in a sea of non-presence. None of the other characters had much of a presence to me.
I agree. I think that Shin Hattie is the name of the apprentice that he's got. But I liked also her. So I would say the two of them, she contrasts with him so well visually and things like that. And she also has, whereas he's under control, we're going to talk, or I'll talk more about like emotion and some kind of characteristic of a personality. She seems like she's got one that contrasts with his. And so I think that, yes, him, but then the pair of them are the high point.
Yes, I would agree. I'm not as big on her, but she didn't do a bad job. And she has an interesting face. I thought she handled a lightsaber fairly well. Like, she didn't look completely out of sorts. The battle with, we'll get to that later, but I think she was okay. I'm not negative on her, but I am positive on Balon. I thought he was a cool character. But you're right. The two of them together probably are one of the more compelling, I guess, duos on this on the show.
So they free the woman on board, because that was their goal, to get on board and free the prisoner. And they do that, and you say that takes 6.5 minutes or something like that. And then we go to Ahsoka.
Yeah, so and they show what you kind of want to see from Force users, competency with a lightsaber, overpowering larger numbers, telekinesis, Force pushes, like that's what you want to see. And those two characters gave us that. If I had a criticism, it would be most of the action I've already seen. I've seen Rebels with those helmets in white hallways. I saw Darth Vader chop them down already. So even though I liked seeing this version of it, it just felt like a variation of something I've already seen before. So there was like an excitement and then kind of oh, that's it. There's nothing new here. Like I thought maybe they would add something new, and they really didn't. Like, even Force Awakens had Kylo Ren freeze the laser in mid-air. At least that's something new that's believable. They didn't really go beyond what we've already seen, I thought.
James says Balon, Skull, and Shin Hati. Skull and Hati are very important wolves in Norse myth. Likely a connection there.
Interesting.
And I'm going to bring this up a couple of times, and it's already kind of come up already. There is a very medieval fantasy styling to this show. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're drawing from Norse myth there. Because I see that, which I don't see in Star Wars elsewhere.
Well, I mean, change the names a little bit. I mean, it sounds like Balon, Skull, and Shin Hati are the exact names. James, are those the exact names of the Norse gods?
Well, I think it's the last names, Skull and Hati.
Okay.
So
that's pretty direct from Earth culture then.
They're only mentioned in passing in the materials we have, but they chase the sun and moon in hopes of catching and eating them. Skull means the one who mocks. Hati is the one who hates.
Okay.
Which does fit for her. It seems like, with her facial expressions and things like that. But even Balon, when I think Balon, I think of, it's not spelled exactly the same way, I don't think, but Balon Greyjoy.
Balon Greyjoy.
Balon Greyjoy, yeah. So it's just Skull and Hati, but the spelling is the same. So
okay, that's pretty odd. See, I think I would have messed up. I would have played with the spelling at the least, because otherwise, if it's actual cultural references to our planet, whatever. I mean, at this point, that's the smallest concern. But that's interesting, James, that you say that. At least there's an effort to tie it into something recognizable, I guess. I guess you could say that. But they do rescue this person named Elsbeth, and she is, an enemy of the New Republic, and fairly dangerous apparently, but not dangerous enough to provide security escort for her transport. And she's saved rather easily. This doesn't look like to be a big challenge for the two Merc Jedis. Yeah, not exactly subtle. It's a real easy jailbreak.
Well, there's talking about names. There's a dude named, yeah, there is a dude named Ellen or Ellen Sleaze Bagano. Yeah.
Sometimes creativity misfire. You could miss.
Well, there's also an alien race called the Mon Calamari.
Yeah. But that somehow works, that they get away with that one.
Well, and a big monster called the Rancor.
True.
Yes,
but again, I think
they couldn't call that the big unfriendly. They had to go with something like the Rancor.
That's true. But I think also the delivery, the portrayal of what it is you're naming is what will really seal the deal on whether that name works. I have a feeling Balon Skull will be fairly well remembered. He's one of the few new names on the show that I remember. I didn't even remember the Apprentice. I didn't remember a lot of the other names in the show, except for like Hera and Ahsoka and Sabine. I already knew them. So anyway, so they rescue this lady and they take her away, and she's like, Jedi knows about the map. Her name is Ahsoka Tano. And then you get the title reveal, and then we switch settings. So after a rather lively opening, this show slams on the brakes and pretty much stays idling for the rest of the next 2 episodes, in my opinion, with some action, but very, very boring action, in fact. The next scene is Ahsoka Tano walking. Now, I timed this as well, and I did not do this for the whole show because it became impossible because there were so many time problems with this. Even my kids started to get, once I pointed it out, my kids who are 8 and 11 began to become very infuriated with the pacing of the show as well. They would sit there and stare. They're like, nothing happens. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. I'm like, correct. So even my kids, could see that this is a problem. So I wrote, this is what happens. Ahsoka approaches temple. It takes 1 minute and 2 seconds for her to do this. In Indiana Jones, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it took him about 6 seconds. He finds it. He takes sand, and he's doing something. He's putting sand in the bag, and he's like, don't worry, stick close to me. And then he goes in. Took him 6 seconds to get in there and gave you a little plot point, which will become important later when he switches the idol with the sandbag. It's her walking for 1 minute and 2 seconds. I'm sorry, but in a show, that is an eternity to have no new content where all I can explain is that she's approaching the temple. That's an amateur mistake by all accounts. Amateur filmmakers will do that, and amateur filmmakers will sometimes think that the costumed individual is so awesome to look at that we want to stare at it for 1 minute and 2. We don't care that much. The filmmakers and the costume makers might really like this, but as viewers, we need to know the story. We need to move it along. This should have been edited. They should have cut almost 50 seconds out of this approach of the temple. And that's just the approach.
Well, that kind of thing I think about, especially coming after our conversation with Star Trek V. And I suppose this is from hanging around with Brianna and her discussion of directing so often that I felt like from Star Trek V, we talked about some things in there that I felt like these are director mistakes. Of course, that was William Shatner who was doing this. I was like, there's some things in here that the director should have caught and things like that. I also felt that way with Ahsoka here, that I was like, I'm watching some things that the director should have stopped or edited out or fixed the delivery of lines and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, this is really the director who I think is supposed to be fixing a fair bit of this. There's the writing too, but
I think you're directing too. You are. I don't think you're right. I know you're right. There are directorial problems with this, and I hate saying it because I am one of have always been a huge fan of Dave Filoni. What he did with the Clone Wars and Rebels was nothing short of spectacular, given the everyone else's efforts, which is very minimal. Even Favreau with Mandalorian, there was some dry parts to that, but it was still good. But even then, there was some filler in the Mandalorian that I was surprised to see. But there is a lot of filler in this, a lot of filler.
These 2 episodes should have been one episode.
It should have been one episode.
It should have been 1 hour-long episode.
Right. Instead of an hour and 45 minutes, this should have been a 38-minute episode tops. You could, and I'm not kidding. If you trimmed, like a lot of times there'd be dialogue like, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, dude, edit out 6 seconds there. You know, you could do that in between all the dialogue over and over and over again. You will literally chop out 20, 30 minutes just in between dialogue. You know what I'm saying, Heath? Like,
yeah.
Like even with the cultists, like you have to deliver. There's a certain timing to dialogue, you know, right? Like there's a, like in comedy, there's a certain timing to the back and forth. This lacked all of that nuance.
A very important part of this is that, when you're talking about dialogue, it's extremely important to think about how long it takes to say something.
Well, have you ever seen the movie? No. Nice. I was like, man, he's taking a long. Oh, I get it. Man, that's great. Have you ever seen Birdman?
I have. It's been a while, but I have seen Birdman, yes.
Well, there's a scene in there where they're reading a script. It's Ed Norton and Michael Keaton, and Ed Norton is like the savant. He memorizes the script the first time, and he's like, what is he really saying there? He goes, I think that's an F-U. He's like, so say it like that. So what they're doing is they're looking at the lines and they're trying to figure out the subtext so they know the emotional content to deliver lines and go back and forth. And once they got that subtext right, the scene pops on stage, and the two characters are really happy with their work. That's part of acting. That's part of directing. That's part of the thespian experience. You always hear about comedic timing. You have to be able to know when to do the punchline the right way. There's a lot of nuance to these things, and that's what actors do. That's what directors know. And you should be able to look at a scene and say, is all of this coming through? What is the subtext? Zero. I felt there was zero subtext. I think there was supposed to be this idea that there was tension, let's say. Tension, generic tension between the characters. So what do? And this is like 101, according to, again, amateurism, in my opinion. Tension between you two. That's not defined. So what do? You have a character goes, and the other character's like, like that's not, you're not giving me anything. I get, if you want tension, we need to know what kind of tension. We need to know what their backstory is. And you can convey more tension in back and forth dialogue. You know how much tension is in some of the Quentin Tarantino scenes? And they're not even talking about the relevant issues. They're talking about cheeseburgers and foot massages. That's a genius. That's someone who understands nuance and background and the function of the scene to get all of that across. And here you have two characters saying lines with generic tension, and that's about as far as it gets. And that's pretty much all these two episodes had. Out of the three lead actresses, I think Sabine Wren was the best acting, but I'm talking like, I give these guys all D minuses, and I would probably give her a C minus. But
I would agree that the actress who plays Sabine is probably the best, but they were still. James says, when you know what you're looking at, it becomes second nature to be able to call out what's directorial versus writer error. And I think there is writer error too, because it's just too long. I mean, you could have condensed scenes and we put this together, but yeah.
Totally. Like there's like writer error. Actually, I had to stop myself because it started to get so irritating. Ahsoka has a line that says, I don't understand. She goes, what is it? I don't understand why things have to be so hard. And I'm like, that's a line in the script. I don't understand why things have to be so hard. You used to be a Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. You led clone armies into massive planetary invasions. The Jedi Order turned against you, and you became a fugitive. You left the Jedi Order behind with a big moral stand, which turned out to be correct. You don't understand why things have to be so hard. Is it a problem if it's hard for you? Like, I don't know. Like, it's such a dumb line. And by the way, there was a bunch of those lines in this show, but that's an example of a writing problem on top of the director's problem, where you have two people delivering dialogue like this with generic tension in between. Very poorly done, in my opinion.
James says, sounds like the prequels, lines delivered either flatly or wryly and given zero subtext. You are my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Like, no, you didn't. I saw you. You antagonized him for 3 films.
Totally. That's actually great. See, here's a great point of flaws in filmmaking, but brilliance in functionality. I think the reason the prequels were able to be saved by the Clone Wars animated series is because there was a functional world there that the 3 2-hour films didn't quite capture, but the long form storytelling of 7 seasons of the Clone Wars really fleshed out. So the function was there and the world was there. And when I saw the Clone Wars animated series, I was like, this is what the sequel should have been. For example, there was a scene. This was the scene that sold me on the Clone Wars. There's a scene where they're in a Republic Venerator class ship, right? And they're approaching a planet. And they're like, this is a planetary-wide invasion. And there's 3 of these Star Destroyer-looking things. And Anakin is on the bridge, and it looks like a Star Destroyer bridge. And he's standing next to Admiral Yularen, which I think James mentioned earlier. And he's got his hands behind his back, and he's looking out those triangular windows. And I was like, oh, my God. Like, the Republic was really turning into the Empire. And now they're in the Clone Wars. They're behaving like the Empire. The series brought that home. There's even scenes with Obi-Wan Kenobi standing on the bridge of what appears to be a proto Star Destroyer in a commanding pose, looking out the windows, observing space battles. I'm like, all the Jedi were almost miniature Darth Vaders for a while in the clone. I mean, they're coming into these planets and there's clone troopers behind them. I'm like, that's what Darth Vader does. So the animated series just captured my imagination with the good Empire, and it looks awfully similar. But they're the good guys. They're compassionate. There's a lot of differences, but the look is very similar. That's my point about functionality. Lucas envisioned all of this, and when you took the time to unpack it and spread it out, it still worked, and there were some incredible stories in there. But when it comes to directing and dialogue, there are long swaths of the prequels that are unbearable to watch. There's some good stuff in there.
I have not been kind to the prequels. I know that a lot of people after the sequel trilogy have looked back on the prequels and thought that they're much better than they were remembered. But I even at the time, I didn't think they were all that great. I remember I saw the Phantom Menace a few times, but it seemed like most of the people in my circle then weren't huge fans of them. And I even remember after the third one, I remember having a discussion about it and thinking that it was not that great with my aunt and uncle like outside. And my uncle said, well, at least it's over. We could not have been more wrong. But I remember that being the feeling about the prequels at the time. And I hadn't watched them since. I only had seen the Revenge of the Sith once in theaters. And like 2 years ago, I watched it again. I was like, you know what? Because I was sitting here painting stormtroopers. And so I watched it. I said, I'm just going to watch them again and just see if they remember it. But I didn't think they were anything. They were what I remembered them being.
Well, there were things I liked about. I mean, I did not like them either. Just to be upfront, I liked Revenge of the Sith, but even Revenge of the Sith had a lot of the same problems with the dialogue, the woodenness of the characters, and the bizarre dialogue, and things that just like Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones. I think was the worst offender. Like the love scenes were oh my God, they were so bad. Like, I'm haunted by the kiss you should have never given me. Even now, I want to close my ears because like I can't absorb that.
Scott is with you. Scott Graham just jumped in. He says 34 minutes behind, but he says, I like this guy. Last season of Clone Wars, best Star Wars ever. Absolutely preach it.
Man, it is excellent stuff. There are episodes. I'll tell you. So I liked a lot of season 1, and then there was an episode in season 2. If you want to sample of the Clone Wars, each episode is 22 minutes. If you can get it, if you have Disney Plus or if you have access to it, it's even worth renting, in my opinion. There's an episode in season 2 called Landing at Point Rain. And it is the Galactic Republic returns to Geonosis, and it is like a World War II style battle. The battleships come in, the Y-wings come out and move into formation. And they start to come down. There's a bunch of those Republic drop ships coming in. The Geonosians fire all sorts of flak in the sky. They send up those ships, and there's an engagement as they're coming down onto the planet. It's an amazing battle. Skywalker is in one of the gunships, leading Kenobi's in another, and General Ki-Adi-Mundi is in a third. All three of them get shot down. It's an incredible battle. And then the battle moves up into space, and Admiral Yularen, who's on one of these Republic Star Destroyer type thing, he's like, I can't send reinforcements. Like, he's under distress. It's awesome. I love it. I couldn't get enough of it. And and I started to notate which episodes have these set piece battles that really show you the Separatists versus the Republic in the Clone Wars. And it is just excellent stuff. There's great lightsaber battles, all sorts of stuff. And by the way, there are, I know they made a big deal about the show. Ahsoka has the first live action female lightsaber battle, which is great. But there was two better lightsaber battles in the Clone Wars animated, but Ahsoka fights Asajj Ventress. There's plenty of lightsaber battles between just women, and Barriss Offee fights Ahsoka at one point. Is that right? Does she fight her? It might have, and I think it was her and Anakin. My point is, it was done better. It was done first, and it was done better on the Clone Wars.
Let's talk about world building for just a minute, because I think this is something that Star Wars is suffering from and has been ever since the prequels. A lot of things that happen in the prequels that set up some of the world building, especially regarding the Jedi and their number and their relationship with the Sith and their number and the way they act and the way they behave. That's not what was set up in the prequels, is not anything that I ever would have thought was the case after having watched the original trilogy. Now, of course, that's on George Lucas, so it's his, but he set up some things in there that have had ramifications throughout all the rest of it, and including all the other films and all these things about how this is supposed to be set up, including like, hey, there are only 2 Sith, so you don't have more dark Jedi. All of the Jedi or all of the Force users. We got the Jedi, and then we've only got 2 of the Sith. We don't have, what people would call like a gray Jedi or things like that. And by the way, the Jedi are these stoic monastic people, which, like I said, maybe that was his vision from the original trilogy, but it's not something that I was always surprised by that, But it seems to me that the world building has suffered because of that inclusion, instead of being able to allow the Jedi and the Sith to be more organic.
So if I were in charge of Lucasfilm, which I'm not, I would go back and explore the formation of the Sith before the Rule of 2. I think it would be great Star Wars to show the rise of orders of moral orders of Force users. I would love to see the first Force users start to take form. I would love to see the first people who learned to use the Force and used it for evil, and how they would maybe take over planets and things like that, with armies of these people, good, at varying levels, and then show the people who tried to oppose them and how they became the Jedi Order, and how you could do some amazing things by resetting the board, by going back however many years it was when the Sith and the Jedi first formed up. You have real conflict there. So yeah, you're right. The Rule of 2 certainly confined the dark side. You got the impression that it forced those two to be really good and really manipulative if they were going to survive in a world where the Jedi are so numerous.
Well, and then you also have the elimination of the Jedi. So you were supposed to, Darth Vader was supposed to extinguish the Jedi, and there weren't very many of them. But in order to continue all of the storytelling after Return of the Jedi, we only continue to multiply the number of Force users or ex-Jedi or what that happen to have slipped through. And it's like, okay, totally. Everybody ends up slipping through. And so to me, that loses a lot of the gravitas there.
Totally. In fact, I think Ahsoka Episode 1 really weakens the Jedi for the Force altogether, because, like you said, you went from a more Sith versus Jedi. It was a controlled power. Force users were found and educated. And now with the introduction of Balon and Hatai, whatever, you've got another group of these not Jedi, not Sith, from what I could tell, because he says they pay me well. So they're mercenary, Force users, ex-Jedi. Ahsoka's an ex-Jedi. So now you've got, and they keep using the term Jedi. And I'm like, but none of these people are Jedis. Like, if you like Jedi so much, make them a Jedi. Do something with Jedis then. But like even the apprenticeship, like, why not have a whole classroom of people? Like, if there's no Jedi order, you do not have to follow any of their protocols. And why would you if you don't believe in the Jedi? If you think this is a bad order and of no value, then why are you following in their footsteps on all of their protocols, including the apprenticeship? Because they're in Ahsoka, the live action show, they really suggest they show that Ahsoka was training Sabine, and this didn't go very well. But Sabine has no abilities with the Force in Ahsoka. She never uses like telekinesis or anything. She simply knows how to use a lightsaber, and not very well, as we find out at the end of episode 1. So, but I agree with you. I think the world building has gotten so sideways that it's so loose that I can't really follow any of it anymore. It seems to be just Force users, generic, far more generic, and generic rebels. The rebel, the New Republic. I don't know.
Well, it's loose, so not only it can't be followed, but also I care less as a result.
Yeah, actually, and Scott Graham, I agree. I thought I would, now that I understand what they're trying to do. Let's see. Ahsoka rewrite, opening scene, a whaling ship chases down harpoons of a space whale, and then is interrupted and terrified by a dark Jedi, Balin and Shin, both who are looking for a Purgil expert. Probably would have been awesome. Yeah, the Save the Whales is kind of making a comeback, isn't it? But they are late. Cut to Ahsoka and Sabine already together as they approach the home of the Purgil. That's awesome, man. I'll tell you, I actually, on accident, conceived of a different opening, which I think would have been better given a sense of structure, and I'll get to that in a second. But and also I just want to address something you had said earlier, Scott. I actually have tracked on an Excel spreadsheet every episode of Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Rebels, and I grade it. Gold, silver, bronze are not worth anything. So I have a very elaborate note system on the Clone Wars on which ones to watch. That way you can skip all the little kid episodes and go right into the best stuff for Star Wars. It is so good to get the good Star Wars out of that. That's why I'm so disappointed in Ahsoka, because I had a lot of faith in Dave Filoni, and this doesn't seem to be his type of Star Wars. It seems to be his type of Star Wars in the sense that these are his characters. And, some of it is his world. He does like to use, like Corellia. Like, he likes to use the real Star Wars worlds and everything. But it did not feel like his plotting or dialogue or action or sense of conflict and drama at all. This seemed more like Lucasfilm style Star Wars drama. So anyway, yeah, I had a lot of problems with the world building in this, and it was inferior to the cartoons. Cartoons had much better world building.
And why are the Jedi so stoic? Why do they all have to be so stoic? It ends up giving them all the same kind of personality. And Ahsoka's got the same thing here. And I realize, okay, with like jaded warrior and all that kind of thing. But if every Jedi has to be monk-like and stoic, it hurts. It hurts to have now. Of course, it also hurts that we decide to have everybody else like stoic, as well.
Oh, yeah, that's bad in this.
It is, but like that hurts when you're like, what is a characteristic Jedi? Oh, they can't have emotions for some weird reason. So that means they've all got to be, emotionless and which sometimes is like really weird and almost cruel. But
Yeah.
You've got that, and they all have to be that way, which gives you a lack of variety in your Jedi. And also from the world building perspective, even their clothing. That's all the same when they're uniformed. I never would have thought that there was like a Jedi uniform and it was based on what Obi-Wan Kenobi was wearing in the original movie.
It's all based on that.
And it hurts. And you can even see that in cosplay. You know, you see some people do Jedi, you know, but if you want something that's uniformed, there are things that are uniformed in Star Wars, like the people who do the Stormtrooper cosplay, they're uniformed. Or if you want to do the Rebel Troopers, they're uniformed. But one of the much more interesting things that you see people cosplay and get really involved with are the Mandalorian, because even though they have a look,
you can modify it.
You can modify it. And you see the guys who are doing the Mandalorian cosplay, and they've got very exacting standards on like the width of the helmet and stuff like that. So you instantly recognize the person as Mandalorian, but you've got all this variety you can have. That's what the Jedi should have had. You should have had.
Enough, even the clones started with just the white clone trooper. In the Clone Wars animated series, I even showed you the Ahsoka helmet. They modified their helmets all the time. There are so many clone uniforms and looks. And that variety, there seems to be an endless appetite for it. I know people that have collected every version of the clones. I have a lot of them. But I guess I haven't gone all in, but I do like all those different modifications of the Clone Warriors. And you just said the Mandalorians have that modification ability. The Jedi seem to be, what's weird is the Jedi seem to be the brown robes with the tannish, interior robe. Anakin had the dark black robe, or like the black modification.
And that's never brought up.
And he's the only one.
You're the only one who, just flaunts the dress code. Like, come on, Anakin.
In the animated series, Obi-Wan has clone trooper armor on his sleeves. He's actually, and his knees. Obi-Wan looks pretty cool. It's actually one of my favorite Obi-Wan Kenobi looks is Clone Wars Obi-Wan from the animated series. He has his light brown robe. It's actually a tunic. It's a light brown tunic. And then he has clone trooper armor from his shoulders to his wrists. And he has clone trooper armor on his shins and knees. And then, the beard and the short hair. He's really awesome in the Clone Wars. It's my favorite look for him. But I agree. I think the sequel trilogy should have. Now, remember, the final film of the original, it's called Return of the Jedi. That tells you what just happened. The Jedi have returned. They immediately got rid of that, and I don't know why.
Let's press reset.
Totally. What they should have done, if you watch it, the new ending to Return of the Jedi, where they show all the different planets celebrating the fall of the Empire, they show a scene on Coruscant, and they're pulling down the statue of Palpatine. In the background is the Jedi Temple. The Jedi Temple is clearly visible in the background, so it has not been destroyed. The sequel trilogy should have had Luke occupy the temple and attempt to bring back the Jedi Order. And to your point, address the issues that caused all the problems for the Jedi. Attachments and relationships. And I even, if it was me writing it, Luke would come to the conclusion that lack of knowledge of the dark side cost the Jedi Order a genocidal moment. So I would have him learn the dark side for defense. And obviously, is there a risk? Is he going to turn? But I would have had him say, look, we have to address some issues that cost the Jedi. No attachments was a problem. Lack of knowledge of the dark side was a problem. And there's probably, and maybe the dress code around here was a problem. Have Luke, overhaul the Jedi Order, the New Testament of the Jedi Order.
Well, and also if things like the Force can run strong in your family, if the Force is something that runs in families, then every time you get a Force user, taking them out of the gene pool and putting them into a monastic order doesn't exactly create new Force users. I mean, you would think our order is dwindling. Well, gee, I wonder why. Maybe somebody needs to read a book of genetics in that giant library of yours and figure out that maybe having husbands and wives and some children would help out the number of Force users.
Can you picture a Jedi? What's this book? Biology? Human sexuality? Whoa.
When he talks about the Force runs strong in my family, I never thought that you were supposed to be celibate as a Jedi. Like that. I don't know where
they call it the Skywalker saga, which implies a lineage, a bloodline. In fact, so yeah. I mean, but what I'm saying is, if you're going to continue the story, you have the chance as the writer to address those flaws And you could have done all of that in the sequel trilogy. I would have made Leia the Supreme Chancellor, not a general. She wasn't much of a general, in my opinion. They never showed her tactically leading armies or doing anything that a general would do. And by the way, and we can get back to Ahsoka.
Yeah.
General Hera. I had some problems with her as well in this show. I'm frustrated with all three of these female characters. These heroines are excellent in the animated series. Ahsoka is one of my favorite all-time Star Wars characters in the animated series. All-time favorites. I have her figurine up there with Captain Rex. I got her clone trooper. She's great. Sabine Wren grew on me over the time of watching Rebels. She's a cool character. And Hera is a really cool character from Rebels. In this one, they make her a general, and she's just as wooden as Ahsoka and Sabine. It's almost like these have the look and name of the character, but the actresses got in there, and you would think they would bring new life to them. It's like the actresses got in there, and then just all the life of the character deflated out of them, and they're just like these.
Is that a director thing? That was
Partially.
what they wanted? Like everybody, you got to be like serious and stoic.
Some of it's some of it is definitely the director, because as a director, one of your jobs is to coax the performance out of the actor. Sometimes they do all sorts of things. In Alien, remember when it first pops out of Kane? They didn't tell the actors that what they were going to do. So they had the cameras rolling, and when that alien pops out, and the actress, I forget her name, she plays Lambert. She's like, ah! She freaks the F out on that set because she didn't know it was going to happen. That's the take they used. That is the director capturing genuine terror out of her out of his actress in that scene. And there's all sorts of stories like this in Hollywood where the director did something to get the performance that they wanted. There's no evidence in Ahsoka that the director made any attempt to get any other performance level out of the actresses, because it's almost like his thing was, you're here, you're Ahsoka, be Ahsoka. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I did films with my buddies. You make the costume and you're so happy with it that when you're on camera, you spend a lot of time kind of with these these squinty-eyed looks. You're doing all sorts of this stuff because you're showing off the character is a visual thing only. It is not fleshed out. So the best you can do as a child is to kind of pose, give this sort of, again, ambiguous stuff, like go find out where they went. You very stripped down, basic level acting. That's what this was. So to me, this just smacked of amateurism in as a director, and the actresses didn't seem to do much with it. And I like Rosario Dawson a lot. But there was no performance out of these actresses. And talking about generals, Hera looks awfully young to be a general. You can always argue that's arguable. Someone could say, well, this person, Alexander the Great, whatever. But it's like, okay, let's say the age isn't an issue. Then I want to see competency and authority out of this person, someone who knows what's going on. And these characters in episode 2 were like, oh, yeah, we're supposed to strip down the Imperial Star Destroyers and take out all the stuff. And she's like, did anyone ever go check on that? And they're like, oof, boy, I thought someone, dude, you forgot to check on Corellia if they were stripping the Star Destroyers? I don't know how any bureaucracy at any incompetent level misses something that big and only discovers it in passing conversation. Well, boy, let's go check on that. Let's go check on Corellia. That's terrible. Terrible writing. And then there's even a scene where General Hera is confronted with this supervisor. I forget what he was called. I actually wrote it down. He was the maybe I didn't write it down. Anyway, he was some sort of supervisor of this dismantling process. Anyway, regional something. Anyway, he's like, I can't let you see that. That's classified. And she's like, I'm a general. I can make this really tough inspection. He's like, all right. And then when she gets through, she looks at Ahsoka and gives kind of that showed him a little smirk. And I'm like, no general is impressed with themselves when their orders are followed. If you're a general, you're not just a general in title. Your culture, the military hierarchy has bestowed this upon you from years of experience. Your authority is unquestionable. Every military order knows that you don't just question authority, that there is a chain of command. So let me ask you this. Would you ever imagine a scene in a World War II movie with General Patton or MacArthur where he's like, let me through? And they're like, I don't think I should, sir. And then he's like, well, I'm a general, don't you know? And then look at his subordinate, told you I could get him. Could you ever imagine a World War II general being so proud of himself that someone obeyed their order? That's not how a general acts. So I don't know what she was drawing upon, who she was channeling. I don't know what her thinking was there to play this role. But if you're a general, you have unquestioned authority. It's not for him to tell you what's classified or unclassified. Only your superior officer could tell you that. And there's a defined chain of command. And Heath, I know you're really smart about military issues. I'm sure you would even be more rigid on this.
I hated that scene. I was going to get to it because I got my own thing to say about that. Because that's I got several things to say on this subject that we've been talking with the thing. So I'll lead up to that. So we'll go to that. But first of all, to go back just a bit, when you're talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi and so forth, and the idea of the generals in general,
Nice.
It surprises me, and I don't know why this happened. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that the Jedi are, for some reason, the Republic's officer corps. That's another one of those things that I never would have thought was the case watching the original series. But then all of the Jedi become high-ranking officers in the Republic for whatever reason. Now, Obi-Wan Kenobi is General Kenobi. So I always expected that to mean that he actually had a military career. Like his career was a general, an officer in the Republican Army, or whatever it is.
Right.
He becomes General Kenobi. And then I always thought of Jedi then being something that got overlaid onto whatever you were doing. You know how in Starfleet in Star Trek, you'll have everybody's uniformed according to the Starfleet uniform, but occasionally you've got somebody who breaks the Starfleet uniform, like Worf, wears the sash, or the Bajorans have certain religious things that they wear. I was thinking that if you're a Jedi, you might have multiple different occupations, but your Jedi is overlaid onto that. So if you have a Jedi who is in like the army, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're a career officer, but then like whatever your uniform is, have those aspects of Jedi overlaid, talking about variations and things like that. That's so cool.
Right.
And so that you'd be able to tell that, here is a Republic officer in the Army, in the Navy, whatever, and, they happen to be a Jedi. So you're like you're basically having to do two careers, if you're doing in the military and then also as a Jedi. And then, I even had thought that, like, if there's some kind of emergency situation, you've got your Jedi beeper. That like, the Jedi, you could be doing whatever it is that you're doing. You're also a Jedi. And then, we've got a crisis situation. Wait a minute. Isn't there a Jedi over there? And then somebody's Jedi beeper goes off. Oh my God, there's a crisis. What's going on? And then you go to your view screen to figure out whatever somebody is saying, we got an issue over here.
You know what would have been cool is if they put the Jedi as advisors to generals from an actual military order. And over time, as the Jedi became more and more necessary in actual combat scenarios, Jedi slowly took over this role, and that became part of their downfall. They became associated with militancy instead of wisdom and moral centering.
Or we're going to vet you into the military. Yeah, in that case, you were a role of advisor, but now you're going to be brought in and brevetted to a certain rank or something like that.
Yeah,
that's how I would have done it. Scott Graham, no, I did. I know that you have the problem with the generals right here. So our Jedi generals, a minor prequel flaw that really sticks in my craw. Like that, I saw that and I was like, I have the exact. I was on that. I was going to talk about that as well. Just the idea that Jedi is the officer corps. He isn't master, grandmaster. It should be something different. They shouldn't be commanding troops. Or, like I said, if Jedi is an overlay onto what you are, you could have a military career. Okay, so that there were scenes. And it was this Hera scene in this one that I'm like, gee, I should just stop. in the scene that was like that in Obi-Wan Kenobi for me. I didn't finish Obi-Wan Kenobi, but in Obi-Wan Kenobi, you did?
Unfortunately.
The scene where I was like, I just have to stop in Obi-Wan Kenobi was where they were running with Leia. I forget exactly where it was. It's been so long, but they're trying to meet with like the pilot of some shuttle or something. And they're trying to get her off the planet through the tunnels and someplace like that.
Yes.
And they tell her to just run and go meet the pilot. And I said, like, I think out loud at that moment, that was like, she has no idea what that guy looks like. I mean, I have no idea what that guy looks like. Nobody said, look for the pilot with like the green hair or, whatever alien species. And this, I'm like, nobody would just send her off in this situation, especially Obi-Wan Kenobi, and just say, run down.
Here's a writing tip. The pilot who goes by the name of, and then add the name
and like make sure it's him, or something. do because as soon as that happened, I was like, first of all, neither one of those characters who are protecting Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi, would ever do that. Like that was just like the dumbest thing you can possibly do. And then it was obvious at that moment when that happens where it was going, that she's going to get onto the ship with the wrong person, that the bad guy is going to be there and taking her and going to capture her. That was so obvious. And so that was the point where I was like, I just have to stop.
Yeah.
With this, it was that Hera scene. So I believe that's in episode 2.
2.
Okay. So Hera, General of the Republic here, has already established that she's skeptical of what personnel might be at this facility. They might be Imperials, or still loyal to the Empire. Because they were doing that. So that she knows that she doesn't feel comfortable in that environment. She expects there might be spies or people with uncertain loyalties right there in that facility. So that's already been established. But then when they're up there in the control room and she says, what kind of fleet, what ship is that for? And he says, that's classified. And her response is, I'm a general. Nothing is classified to me. I'm like, that's not how classification works, because you also have to have need to know. I mean, that's a basic thing. It might work differently in Star Wars, but if it does, you've got to establish that. Because no general would go, oh, well, nothing is classified to me. No, things can be classified to generals all the time if they have no need to know that particular information. So her expectation there that just being a general is supposed to give her access to all classified things is weird, at least. But then she orders him to tell, like, I'm ordering you to expose the information. Even if she can do that, and there is no limit to what her being a general can get her access to, she's in an unsecure environment. She has no idea who else is there. She has no idea who is listening. It might be uncleared personnel to hear that particular information that she would be exposing the information to in an environment where she already has cause to believe that there are enemy operatives in the room.
But
why?
So in the U.S. Civil War, when the Confederacy surrendered, Union troops moved in and occupied cities. They took over all of the armories. Like, you secure all of the high value targets of that society that you're moving into. This was almost like they made it seem like the Republic's like, the Empire's gone. Everyone go about your business. And then like years later, someone's like, has anyone ever checked on, Lockheed Martin? And they're like, no, like, oh, silly me. Let's go check on Lockheed Martin real quick. And then when they get there, they're like, I don't care if you're a general. This is classified. Like, it doesn't make any sense. This is lacking functionality. Totally. Because also, he wouldn't necessarily know if it's classified, in my opinion. I feel like a lot of times these bureaucrats in these smaller roles would be like, oh, it's not letting me pull it up. It says that's classified.
Well, that's what I would have thought. That like there's something on his,
Right. And then she could say, override, classify, General Hera override 6166B. And then it projects onto her eyes only device and she can read it. Like, to me, that would show some level of organization on the part of the New Republic. This made it seem like the New Republic was a recess with 2 lunch ladies. And now they're walking around the schoolyard seeing which Imperials are up to no good and which rebels may not be playing by the rule. Like that is not there's no scenario where that is the case. In human history, That's not how it works when you've subdued. Like we still have bases in Japan and in Germany from World War II, the United States. You know, you don't just walk out of these places. You occupy them and you make sure that this thing does not reconstitute. They made it seem like they told the Empire, "Hey, are you gonna ever reconstitute?" And the Empire, like, "Nope." And behind their back, they're like this, and they duped them. They got them. They they crossed their fingers, and the Jedi and the New Republic forgot to check on Corellia for all these years. It's so unbelievable that to me it destroys the believability and the function of the scene. Hera doesn't seem real. The conflict doesn't seem real. I like the idea of Imperials still working for the New Republic. By the way, that was a big problem in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union. Most of the administrators were ex-communists that had continued to run the bureaus of the new democratic Poland or Czech or what were some of the other ones? Some of the Stan countries that came out of it. Ukraine, you know, they were ex-communists. That's all they knew, but they were the ones who had the expertise and knowledge. That's a believable scenario, but it is not believable that nobody checked on them. It's impossible to believe. And if it's true, then the New Republic is the most incompetent group of galactic administrators in the history of this galaxy and others, in my opinion.
I have a note here that
Sorry,
throughout
a little
this-
rant.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know where we need to go back to, but I like that we got into to episode 2, and there's no reason we have to go in chronological order right here. But just as a general note, right here, I made the note that it seemed like throughout all of this, and this I was still in episode 1 as I wrote this, but it seemed like in a lot of Ahsoka, they wanted you to feel like there was a lot of gravitas and weight and serious stuff going on. That they just wanted to convey that by people looking emotionless and speaking something kind of cryptic and having, you know, walking down a hall and, oh, they know what they're talking about. What does it actually mean? I don't know. Oh, you know, but she's giving some type of line that implies she knows something else, or taking a long time in general to walk up to scenes or walk up to particular objects or get something open or all of that. It seemed like they were trying to use that slowness to imply gravitas that I guess they didn't feel like they could get any other way. But that's
I think you're totally correct. Totally correct. I got the exact same impression that they thought this was conveying gravity or gravitas. That's a great word. Mystery, tension, conflict, and it didn't do any of that. It looked like they didn't know what else to do, and so they just kept the cameras rolling. And I timed that whole sequence with Ahsoka in the temple, and it drove me. It took 9 minutes. 9 minutes, and some of that was just minutes chewed up of her walking and looking and twisting and walking and looking and twisting and smiling, and I'm like, dude. This is not storytelling. I don't know what you're doing. And on the functionality note, the plot is, so this is the plot. Grand Admiral Thrawn has been banished. Okay? He's been banished. They actually say that's why he was banished. No one knows where he is, or you know, the New Republic doesn't know where he is. So there's a map that someone left behind that says where his location is. And this map, which must be recent, it's a recent map if Grand Admiral Thrawn recently lost in the Battle of Endor and just escaped or was banished to this other galaxy, right? So this is news. Him leaving his location, this is new information. That is left behind in an ancient temple? That's like when we were looking for Osama bin Laden, the CIA is like, check the pyramids of Giza. We might find a map that his friend left behind. Like, again, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
it's actually integrated with ancient Egyptian architecture. That you're going to have to do some Indiana Jones things to get out.
That's what I'm saying. Like, could you imagine the CIA being like, here, let's put the staff of Ra here. And then it's like, zing. Oh, we found Osama bin Laden. He's in Tanis. He's in the Well of Souls. I mean, that's essentially what this plot line is. That Indiana Jones used the Staff of Ra, and they found Grand Admiral Thrawn in the Well of Souls. That's where he is, because he left behind this information in ancient Egyptian technology. Like you said, this makes no sense. It was like they wanted the fun of exploring a temple, and they wanted the fun of a cryptic map, so they just did both, and they're not compatible. This does not work, like, at all.
And not to mention, the idea of a map to a person or a thing is not like something we haven't seen in Star Wars recently. But at least this map was not an actual jigsaw piece, which was one of the most embarrassing things that has ever been put on screen in Star Wars.
Yeah, because at least you can narrow down it's this group of planets.
Yeah, and we can't figure this out. And so here's an actual jigsaw piece that we've got to holographically put up here. At least it was different from that. But
so Scott is asking a question. Is it a map to Thrawn, or is it a map to another galaxy? And they know Thrawn is there by some other means. That's what I thought. I thought maybe I would backtrack a little bit, but they put this device, and it creates an orb of all these other galaxies, and it shows the galaxy that Thrawn's in. So I was like, oh, it's just showing which galaxy. That's not so great. But then it creates this beam right to the planet he's on in that galaxy. So it is the exact location of Thrawn. So it doesn't work. No ancient technology would have Thrawn's in the last 24 months where he went to. Think about it. If Heath and I were in the CIA and we're tracked with finding a terrorist, Heath isn't going to say, hey, Doug, do you think we could find a map to him? I'd be like, Heath, no, dude, there's not going to be a map.
Why would he? If someone does not want to be found, they do not put a map someplace that tells you where they are.
Totally. So I was like, Heath, let's explore ancient temples. He'd be like, Doug, why would we explore ancient temple? So what would we do? We would go, where's the last place Thrawn was? It'd be detective work. We have to go to these places. It's all about interviewing people who might know something. There's a prisoner who was on this, who served in this army that Thrawn was in charge. It's interrogations. It's intel, human intel, human. There's something called, there's actionable intel. Like Heath, you probably know better than I do the levels of intelligence that they actually classify in order to get information from the enemy. That's how you would track somebody down through the intelligence apparatus. Not a map. You wouldn't send a rogue person to find a map. Anyway, it drives me nuts that this was conceived, unchallenged, and then filmed. This got filmed with millions of dollars attached to it.
And the droids, the assassin droids are often very dumb in Star Wars. And of course, there's a certain charm to something like R2-D2 and C-3PO. But anytime we're actually dealing with battle droids and things like that, they should be performing so much better. And here again, we have the assassin droids that show up that are inept, which takes something away from Ahsoka when she's about to fight them, because it's not like they're competent foes. And then for some reason, they've got like nuclear level destruct mechanisms on them.
Well, if you're programming a device, like, okay, this is an assassin droid. I'm imagining programming them with the highest levels of humanoid martial arts, assassination techniques, and then I would equip them with things, tools, weapons that would be the most effective. Poison darts, lasers, knives, they would be painted black so that they could, or possibly have a special armor that could be invisible or camouflaged. I would design it for assassination. And if I was going to put, and I probably would, a self-destruct in there, it would be instantaneous. The second that the droid's power was out, this thing would trigger the immediate explosion for self-destruct just to take the guy out. Even Mandalorian, Didn't that thing have a self-destruct that took out himself and all these other? Didn't the IG droid blow himself up? So the whole point is you're taking them with you, right? Just like Gorman and Vasquez and Aliens. We're going, but we're taking everyone around us with them. These droids come up with a new strategy: announce the self-destruct, get into a pose, and then wait about 40 seconds. Exactly.
And it's an unbelievably large blast. Like,
oh my
what
God!
Are these guys carrying that does that? And if they needed the map, they weren't going to have it after that. If she didn't get away, and they do, like, the droid that walks up and in that very deep voice, give us the map. And nobody just shoots Ahsoka from behind. But that was another one of those situations where it seemed like that was trying to convey the gravitas of we're going to have this droid slowly walk up and in a Kylo Ren kind of voice.
Yeah.
Talk about, give me that map.
Well, why don't they have guns or lasers? I mean, the worst thing you could try to do if you're a droid is to engage a Jedi in close quarters combat. Like, for example, in Revenge of the Sith, they had those droids on Grievous's ship that had those purple beams on the tips. That made sense on some level. A, they could fight against lightsabers. They were lightsaber capable. And two, they're bodyguards. So they're expecting close quarter combat on a bridge to protect General Grievous. These are assassin droids. I don't know about you, but there's long distance sniping. There's booby traps. There's poisons. Assassins have a lot. These numbnuts come out with a staff and attack a Jedi with zero defense to lightsabers, by the way. Right away, she goes zoom, and it's like cuts them in half. I was like, strategy plan B, guys. Yeah, you don't have any defense against lightsabers. Don't attack her up close. Like, I hate when such obvious problems exist in these things. It's crazy.
That is all the kind of stuff that I thought about before getting obsessed with story structure. But like when I was dissecting movies, it would be stuff like this, and the plot here is just not working.
Well, these are clues that the person behind the storytelling doesn't know what they're doing. They don't understand. They don't seem to understand the basic concepts of combat. Well, they don't understand military. They don't understand assassination. They don't understand lightsabers. We haven't even got into that.
Well, but on the subject of the droids,
yeah,
it also seems to me that if you have these assassin droids, you would not program it with persistent memory of where it came from.
That too, you'd have no. Dude, even when you buy it, like even in like the real world, when you're writing a story, let's say you want to write a spy thriller, guns have serial numbers that are rubbed out. Even basic criminals, when they sell handguns, get rid of those serial numbers, and anything that can mark it or make it distinctive. And we're talking like basic 101 criminal level knows how to mask the trail of a gun. People, can't they do VIN numbers if you steal a car?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is not complex. So,
you wouldn't be able to sell many of these assassin droids. They're like, that's not.
Honestly, I wouldn't trust one of these droids to guard my house.
And there was one just hanging. Well, was it one hanging around Sabine's apartment for some reason?
Oh, yeah.
That was for no reason, it seemed.
And by the way, the Star Wars universe in the Clone Wars invented assassin droids. They're like commando-looking droids. They're actually much more effective. They're very cool and nimble and acrobatic. Very good. They were fun droids. They were like they were invented by the Separatists, and they were another level of combat droid that the Separatists made that came out in the Clone Wars, and they were used several times, and they were very, very worthy opponents. And they're quick. These droids literally were like you're designed for nothing. You're not even useful in a salt mine. You'd be too slow, like even in manual labor circumstances. Yeah, I don't know what those droids were.
Well, did you want to talk about the lightsaber issue then?
Yeah, James Bacon knows what I'm talking about. Right? The commando battle droids, The thin ones with the round heads, they were real nimble and acrobatic. They were real good. Oh yeah, it's his favorite type of battle droid. That's what I'm saying. Like, we already have a droid that can do this, and they were awesome in the Clone Wars. So to reinvent this droid and to downgrade it to the point of utter inefficiency, just I mean, you just know that this is not a show in the hands of people who know what they're doing.
But Sable says, I only saw a tiny bit of Ahsoka, but what I saw was bad, and this stream has validated my decision not to waste time trying to watch it.
I hate saying it. And by the way, I'll just say this. It could get better. The Clone Wars did not start with a bang. It started with a thud, and it slowly gathered steam. Now, this show does not have the endless time to find its feet that the Clone Wars had. People had an appetite for Star Wars in 2008, 9, and 10. It was under George Lucas's tutelage, not Kathleen Kennedy's. It was aired on a Cartoon Network. It had a lot of patience from the fandom, good word of mouth. This has none of that. So they just don't have a lot of time if they're going to save it. Thrawn could save it. But based on the kind of problems that Heath and I are talking about, I doubt it, unfortunately.
Okay, so lightsabers.
Sorry, I was reading Japard's.
Recitation.
Yeah.
Recitation. First, weapon selection is critical. If I see one more idiot attacking a Jedi with a blaster pistol, then I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah, there's no sense. I think I've said this on this show. Like, sometimes when I analyze the problems of these scenes, when there's no sense of tactics. Like, if you're an assassin droid, I think how you're going to assassinate the target becomes your first priority. And in order to do that, you need a profile of the target and then an analysis of what is the best way to kill this, to assassinate this target. And walking up on it with a stick, essentially, it was the last choice.
And then you, as a storyteller, have to figure out, okay, this would be a really bad situation for Ahsoka to be in, or whatever character is it's going to be in.
Right.
And I'm not going to downplay that. I've got to come up with some way to get them out of that. The bad way to do that is to make the bad guys dumb, which is kind of the situation. But in order to say, now, how can this Jedi overcome this, or your main character overcome this? That's your job to figure out. Well,
make her face that Balon and have him almost beat her and have her barely escape and be like, damn. You know, remember in even Phantom Menace, when Qui-Gon, who's a great character in the Phantom Menace, fights Darth Maul, who's also a great character in the Phantom Menace. For all its flaws, Qui-Gon and Darth Maul were awesome. Those two have a battle. Qui-Gon barely escapes. He's out of breath, and he's like, I don't know who he was, but he was really well trained in the Force. That said to us, this guy's dangerous. Darth Maul's dangerous. This show's like, let's put her up against wooden droids, basically. Wooden droids. You know, I don't know. I'm probably belaboring the point. I can't believe that this is what they came up with for Ahsoka Tano. So so he's banished. So Sabine, let's be honest, the show spends an exorbitant amount of time focusing on Sabine. I would say more so than Ahsoka Tano. Would you agree?
I think so. It's focused on, it is Sabine focused, I think. It seems like she's the one who's going to be changing, as far as, I suppose that Ahsoka has got to get over some kind of problem, but she's, at least Sabine was not quite as stoic in the sense that you're going to be, or at least there was some kind of sense of change that she was going to have, potentially. So, it may be her show.
That's a good point. Yeah, Ahsoka doesn't seem like she's on any sort of arc, whereas Sabine does. Immediately, she seems like there is something. She's the one who's the most vulnerable. She's the one that seems to be that there's something for her to learn. My problem, though, is I think when you analyze so Sabine was a character in Rebels, and she was kind of a young, punky artist Mandalorian. That's why her armor's all colored, and that's why her hair was colored and all that. And she was supposed to be the cool, 2015, 2016 punk teenager. Well, that was before A New Hope. Rebels is leading up to A New Hope. It's the early part of the rebellion. So this is after Return of the Jedi. She's a grown woman now, and there's a lot that's happened in the galaxy in between Rebels and Ahsoka, and she strikes me as a teenager. She's still, in every way, when I rewatched it the second time, it became even more apparent that she's written almost as a rebellious teenager still, as if they have not updated their thinking on where her character would be. You know, she should have a strong level of maturity, a strong sense of identity by now, and a firm grasp of who she is and what she likes and doesn't like. You know, those aren't all up in the air, you know, when you're in your 40s, you know. So I think they missed, they're mixed up with her.
I can completely see that. That's a great point. I remember her, like I said, vaguely from Rebels. But yeah, they lead off with her not showing up for some type of ceremony that she's supposed to show up for, which is a very teenage kind of thing.
Playing rebellious rock music.
Playing rebellious rock music, going down a highway on a motorcycle.
And it's an empty highway.
And an empty highway on a motorcycle. Yes.
Now, to be fair, that is how the highway is portrayed in the animated series. It's
okay.
It looks pretty much exactly like it's portrayed. Now, it worked in the cartoon, but in live action, it just looks weird, man. And again, rock music, you know, that sort of you know, it's associated with teenage rebelliousness. So another scene that was similar was in Star Trek, the reboot, 2009. Jim Kirk is in that car, and it's playing Beastie Boys. You know, he's rocking out to it. He's like 12 years old in that. And so that's matching the maturity level. But with Sabine, it's almost the same type of music. There was even a few riffs on that I was like, that sounds just like that Beastie Boys song. So I don't know what they're saying, man. I just don't get where they're trying to be with her, and skipping out on a commemoration like that didn't make a lot of sense either, because it's to commemorate Ezra Bridger and the person she seems to be so heartfelt for. So why would you skip that? If you want to make her rebel on something, have her skip some sort of bland New Republic bureaucratic holiday, you know, where they celebrate the mayor. That's something worth skipping.
Yeah, I wrote down who is Ezra at the end of one. I had forgotten. I didn't clue in. Then I went, oh. But I wrote that down. I was like, I don't know who we're talking about. But then I realized, like when I went and looked it up. And then I remembered, that's the boy from Rebels.
Yeah.
So if that was, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. I did, but again, I saw all the episode, you know, right. Like I'm pretty steeped in the lore, but again, it's just a male character opportunity that he's not there. So we just got, you know, it's all girls in this, and it just, and the girls didn't have a lot of personality. So there's not a lot pulling the cart here. And even the three heroines that you have don't even look or act at all like the heroines in the animated series, which were much better.
Well, I remember them having personalities. Like I said,
they were great.
But they had personalities in the cartoon.
Ahsoka Tano was an A+ for me. Hera was like a B. Sabine was like a B. Well, I think Hera might have been like a B+ and Sabine a B. But I liked all of them. They had good arcs, good stories, and this show just put a bottle or a cork in all of them, and they didn't seem to do anything, you know. And then so I guess we might as well talk about it. There's the first live action lightsaber battle between two women, Hattai and Sabine. And so Sabine has had some sort of training from Ahsoka as a Jedi, apparently. And I didn't get any evidence of that until she pulled out a lightsaber. She's attacked by the assassin droid. You'd think that even rudimentary training would have some telekinesis or force push. She didn't have any of that. So when she was fighting that attack droid, it was purely as a regular person. And then she pulls out a lightsaber, and she's, you know, they're doing a lightsaber fight. It wasn't that great of a lightsaber fight. It was okay. It was a lot slower than I'm used to. which I don't mind slow sometimes. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth in A New Hope was pretty slow, but it was driven by dialogue. And I always thought lightsaber battles were an extension of the mental battles going on between the two. So that's why I always appreciated dialogue in lightsaber battles, because, there's a cat and mouse with the dialogue. When I left you, I was but the learner. He's getting in Kenobi's head, and then Kenobi's like, only the master of evil does some, devaluing. So the dialogue can compensate for a slow lightsaber battle. And this one was slow and hardly no dialogue. There's really nothing personal between these two. They're just two women fighting each other with a lightsaber. And Heath, do you want to? Do you feel like regaling them on how it ended?
Well, and that's what everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
That's so much of the, I guess I'll use the word gravitas again, but of lightsabers is gone and has been for a long time. But we could have come up with some better way to wonder whether or not Sabine was going to be alive than having her get stabbed.
Well,
so we already established that is what had killed the captain 35 minutes ago, or whatever that was.
Yes.
40 minutes.
He has to be still alive then.
Yeah, he must be alive.
just a little lightheaded. Just lay down in a bed and get some. And this is real dialogue in Ahsoka. From General Hera to Sabine, who's in bed after being impaled by a lightsaber through the chest. Get some rest. That's real dialogue. I don't know about you, Heath, but if you were impaled by something and I'm like, hey, Heath, get some rest, you'd be like, dude, I hope I live.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah, and everyone's pointed that out. Like, I don't listen. In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn sticks his lightsaber through a blast door, which is like got to be better than steel or titanium. And he's holding it and he's twisting it and it's superheating the metal and they're still coming through. Dude, you're dead if it goes through you. It's over. Sorry.
And there was no reason for them to fight anyway. She had the ball, the mat ball.
Yeah.
That's what they came for. They should have just left. There wasn't a reason to have that.
Yeah, well, I get that. I could see, even if I was the filmmaker, being tempted on having them fight. If I knew Sabine had a lightsaber, I'd be like, oh, got to have a fight here. Now, to your point, I would have structured it different to justify it a little bit better.
Have her coming in with the lightsaber to get the ball herself.
Instead of the assassin droid. Beautiful.
And then instead of the assassin droid, and then have Sabine grab a lightsaber from under wherever it was.
Yeah.
And then have them fight
over
in
my
there.
dead body.
That would have been better.
Well,
it also would have given them an environment to fight in.
Yeah, that was a bad environment, poorly lit. Have fun with it, man. This is your signature combat for your brand. Have fun with it. At least Lucas had fun with those lightsaber battles. Say what you want about the prequels. They had good lightsaber battles. I've seen several articles and rankers on the best lightsaber battles in Star Wars. The Maul, Kenobi, and Qui-Gon Jinn lightsaber battles always in the top 3, if not number 1 in some lists. So, and of course you've got Obi-Wan and Anakin. I don't know, man. Don't take it lightly. Your job is to entertain. So if my job was to entertain all of you with a lightsaber battle, I'd do a better job than they did on that. That said, when she got stabbed, I actually perked up. I was like, oh, okay. I go, as off as this show has been, they just signaled to me that this show could have some serious consequences. They just killed off Sabine Wren. So, and we're both members of Cameron's Patreon, and I posted my opinion. I said the first episode wasn't that good, but I was like, I'll watch second episode. We'll see how it goes. Second episode opens up with Sabine Wren in a hospital, sitting up in bed with a Band-Aid basically over her wound. And they treated it like she got knocked out or had a slight flutter. And she's fine. Absolutely fine. This had no serious impact on her. It just held her back for the rest of the morning and evening. And she's ready to get back out there and get on the road. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I'm like, so you didn't kill Sabine Wren. So the gravity that I thought I understood at the end of episode 1, that's erased. And 2, she's not even seriously wounded.
No, it's not like they cut an arm off or a leg off or something like that either, which is also pretty classic in Star Wars. It's not like she lost an arm because of that.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, being dismembered in combat is archetypal. In fact, in one of the books that I love reading, Star Wars, The Magic of Myth, there's a discussion in the Belly of the Beast, Joseph Campbell model, where they discuss what it means to be in the belly of the beast, and it's expanded. And that's when the hero is swallowed, symbolically killed, or dismembered. That's a clear thing. Luke gets dismembered, Vader, so dismembering is in the theme of Star Wars. It's part of the cost of combat in the Star Wars universe. And to be impaled is to be killed in the Star by a lightsaber. You're done. Oddly, and I don't understand this, Disney Star Wars treats this as totally inconvenient. I think there's been like 4 or 5 characters now that have survived direct impaling by a lightsaber. And that's so weird to me, because if you want the characters to survive, have him get nicked in the arm, or like they did with Obi-Wan Kenobi at the end of Attack of the Clones, he gets hit in the thigh. He's like, he goes down, but there's no real threat to his life. So just do that. But they're not. They're literally, it's like being decapitated, and they're like, all right, don't worry, we got you. Woo, we sewed you back together. Thank God we were able to do this. It's almost that dumb to have several characters survive decapitations because they were able to sew the head back on. It's one step above that level, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the Beskar, right? So there is something that can, right. They have that in the
Well, and a good writer being creative, you can come up with things. They use some creativity with Mandalorians and how they could fight Jedis with technology. And if I understand the Mandalorian lore, part of how the Mandalorians developed was to develop a warrior class capable of fighting a Jedi without the Force. I think that is what I understand about the Mandalorian lore. They're specifically designed to be able to do this. That's cool. That's at least a creative use. And we've seen Boba Fett, fight Luke. We've seen Mandalore on Jedi combat a ton. It's a lot. It's in the animated series, Clone Wars, a lot too. Yeah. Yeah, we've seen Jedi die from one laser blast, from a blaster. Right. That's what I'm saying. Jedi, as good as they are, they could be overwhelmed and shot and killed. So I don't know. You get impaled like that, you're done.
So there wasn't a whole lot else. I don't know what else you have as far as notes. I've got one other note here, but I mean, there wasn't a whole lot that actually happened, because we're talking about because it moves very slowly.
Yeah.
So that's we've already kind of talked about them going. So they get the droid helmet, and that's got the place to go to Corellia, and so we've talked about that. But what else?
Well, so there's another again. This is functionality. If you and I find the head of a robot, let's just say there's a way to figure out. Or no. So we find this map key, right? The map key. She goes.
Oh, right.
The way the dialogue works, Ahsoka's got the map key. And she's like, I can't read it. And General Hera goes, there's someone who can help you with that. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that cook, Dax from Attack of the Clones. This is a Kaminoan saber dart. Remember, he's like, you can tell by the markings. So my first thought was, there's experts for this, or there's computers that can read these things. This show acts like none of that technology exists. You just got to find someone who might be able to help you with this. And she's talking about Sabine. Sabine should be able to help you with this map. And I was like, okay, why? Why Sabine? And her answer is, she's artistic. So I was like, that's why? Out of all the galaxy, the entire galaxy, the entire resources of the New Republic, all the computers, all the droids, the cook, Dex. Out of all of that, none of it's considered. Let's try Sabine. She's artistic. I don't know about you, but if I had this a high-tech map, I wouldn't be like, do I have an artist friend that could maybe figure this out? I'd think of an IT guy, someone in technology. She goes, because she's artistic. And then Sabine, I was like, does she solve it with artistry? No, she just looks at it, changes the colors, looks at it, and then she's like, oh.
She looks at the room, the scan of the room that it's in, and realizes that you've got to put it in the same order as the lines on the floor.
Yeah, that right. Anyone could figure that out. That does not require the mind of an artist to solve.
You might be able to solve that just by rotating it in various directions, like somebody like I would try to solve a Rubik's Cube because I don't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, but you could probably solve it that way.
Well, so Rubik's Cubes are solved through algorithms. There's a certain pattern you do, and then once you get then you switch the algorithm and you do this other pattern. Right. And that's how you could solve a Rubik's Cube. A droid could figure that out. Give it to a droid, have a droid do all these different solve. Probably solve it within 5 minutes. No, it took Sabine, the artist, to look at the floor and say, match it to the floor.
It also goes to your idea or what you were talking about with the CIA looking for the map. It's like, who do we get to help us with this thing that we found in here? How about an Egyptologist then? Like, I've got a friend who is a specialist in hieroglyphics and Egyptology.
No, even better.
That's
even better. We have an alien map piece. Who should we get it? Phil Tippett. He did all the artistry on Star Wars. He should solve it.
He should do this. Yes.
He did the matte paintings. He would be able to solve this.
Oh, yeah. Man. So that's instead of let's go to an artist, it should have been the Egyptologist or whatever. Yes. and she does take it away. Like Ahsoka should have been more forceful about that. They didn't need to go back and forth to her apartment and all of this. That's the writing that we got too many scenes. We were going back and forth because Ahsoka does say don't take that out of here, but she doesn't say that very forcefully. Like their people are going to kill us over that. Stay here with this. Don't go over there. She doesn't give any particular reasons. Like, don't you? We're trying to stop a war here. Oh yeah, I know. But like, that's what they say. Instead of, we've got to stick together because there are things coming to kill us. Like, don't go be by yourself with this. She doesn't provide any additional information like that.
Well, nor does she convey much authority. Like, think of Qui-Gon Jinn in Phantom Menace. Stay in that cockpit. He's talking to Anakin. There's a certain parental sound. Yeah. But there's a certain authority. She's just like, oh, and don't leave with that. Okay. Like, I'd be like, I'm just going to, I wasn't, but now I'm going to because.
Now I will.
Yeah. Now I'm so irritated you even bothered to give me a direction because it was so poorly delivered that I'm just going to leave now anyway. Yeah. And it's funny because even my son said he was watching at that point and she goes, don't leave with that. My son's like, oh, she's going to leave, right? I'm like, man, you can even predict all this. Just amazing. So unfortunately, I think Ahsoka does miss. Oh, regional supervisor. That was that guy's title for General Hera.
Oh, regional supervisor.
Regional supervisor. I don't even know if that title makes sense. Wouldn't you be like, weapons conversion supervisor or something more specific?
Chief of engineering or
yeah, I mean, regional sounds like multiple planets in the area, Now, one thing we should talk about briefly is there is the introduction of something new to Star Wars here that I don't know if it's catching a lot of attention, but it should. There's a new galaxy.
Oh, I did write that down.
Yeah.
This is, I was wondering if this is the first time that we had gone intergalactic in Star Wars. I thought that it was, but I wasn't sure in like Heir to the Empire or other things like that if we had introduced other galaxies before or not. But at least from my knowledge of Star Wars, that was a big deal that we were now going intergalactic.
Right. This is not in a galaxy far, far away. This is in a galaxy adjacent to that galaxy far, far away. So that's kind of a big deal because you can introduce, and I think this is why Disney's doing it. They want to get away from Lucas Galaxy. They want to go into their galaxy where they could change the rules and do all this other stuff. That concerns me, given Disney's track record. But technically, you would have all new alien races, all new levels of technology, new rules for the Force. I mean, you could undo the entire brand of Star Wars in one fell swoop if you wanted by simply going to another galaxy. Now, I do think there are intergalactic elements in EU Star Wars. Like I think the Yuuzhan Vong come from a different galaxy, this organic militant group, which I don't like. A lot of people like them. I wasn't a big fan of them.
That's what I was going to ask. I thought I remembered that.
Yeah.
But that was very vague in my memory. So Sable Phoenix and James came up.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Vong,
Everyone knows that.
Vong, I thought they were extra galactic.
Yes, they are.
Okay. So I vaguely had that memory.
Right. Now that is but there was an effort to come up with something new, I feel. I will credit them for attempting something new that doesn't completely unravel the rest of the Star Wars universe. Disney, I do not trust. Kennedy's Lucasfilm, I do not trust them to redesign Star Wars in a new galaxy. I don't trust that. They even said that ancient site they went to find Thrawn's location, the witch. Oh, we haven't even talked about the witch. Witches.
I have that. That's the first time we talk about witches in Star Wars.
No, the witches of Dathomir are a big part of the Clone Wars.
Oh, okay.
But I knew that. And they're actually pretty cool. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you. The witches of Dathomir are pretty cool. I don't like the word witch. I wish they would have came up with a different word, but they're pretty cool in the Clone Wars. They give them cool backstories. One of the Sith, Asajj Ventress, she's a 2 lightsaber Sith, and she's awesome. I like her. She's one of the witches of Dathomir who becomes a Sith. Really, really cool. But the way they introduced him in this was like, oh yeah, hey, I'm a witch. And I'm like,
I'm a witch, right?
Like,
and that
yikes.
again went to my idea that there is a lot of medieval fantasy elements in this, and the all of a sudden mention of a witch was one of them.
Right, but now the way the Clone Wars introduced them was slowly over time. They didn't just be like, hey, there's witches. You'll meet them later. Because then I'd be like, ooh, witches? You know, are there ghosts? Are there goblins and ghouls here? You know, like I don't know. Witch seems a little generic, but it worked in the Clone Wars because it was handled well. This episode's like, she's a witch. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if people who don't know the Clone Wars, if they're going to appreciate that.
I did not.
Because it sounds like she's a Halloween character. You know, they didn't give it any sort of cultural, like even in Harry Potter when they say witch or he witch in the Northman, like sometimes they use the word witch with a cultural connotation. You sense that there's a whole lore behind the word. They did not give me any sense of that. They just said witch. And I was like, dude, not cool. That's a terrible way to introduce the witches of Dathomir. Were they exterminated?
Were they exterminated?
I know there was a huge battle on Dathomir. And by the way, there's a huge plot line in the Clone Wars that takes Darth Maul, his brother, who was pretty much given witch steroids, basically, witchcraft, to pump him up and make him really powerful. So there's a huge bunch of plot lines that cross through the witches of Dathomir. So, yeah, if you like the Clone Wars, you might be excited to hear about the witches, you know, that they're going to be included. But I don't know. You got to be real careful how you introduce witches into Star Wars. And I don't think they were careful in Ahsoka at all. So, yeah, I don't know how they did that. But so you have the witch, you have Balon and Hattai, and they're in this like runes setting, and that's where they discover the galaxy that Thrawn's on. She says that site was built by an ancient people from a distant galaxy. So people from that galaxy have come to the Star Wars galaxy and they've left these runes behind. That seems a little weird because they've never come back. And I don't understand how Thrawn is
Thrawn. Yeah, who left recently.
And Thrawn is over there somehow. Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't impressed with the first 2 episodes. I don't like the writing. I think it's sloppy, amateurish. I don't know if they've delivered much of anything except to very casual fans who will just get excited that there's lightsabers and X-Wings. Or, there's a type of Star Wars fan that views Star Wars as an accessory. I remember, I'll never forget this. I was talking to he was a millennial. He was a younger guy. And we were talking about Star Wars, and he's like, "Oh, dude, look at this, man!" And he showed me this like tattoo he had of the Imperial insignia. I was like, "Now I don't have any tattoos," so I was like, "Oh man, cool, dude! Like you're pretty serious Star Wars fan." So I was like, "Man, this young guy is showing me up," And I was like, "Yeah, remember when they like took those ATSTs out?" And he goes, "What's an ATST?" And I'm like, the small AT-ATs." He goes, "AT-ATs are those like those big things?" I was like, you don't know Star Wars at all. I was like, what are you doing with a tattoo, bro? Like, why are you tattooing Star Wars? You don't even understand it. But then I realized there are people that it's an accessory. They like the accessorize. They want to accessorize themselves at Star Wars. They'll wear the shirts. They'll wear the tats. They'll put a decal on their car, whatever. It's just an accessory. It's a pop culture accessory to them, but they don't know the story. They're not fans the way they would never be able to talk about it like this. And the all-terrain armored transport.
All-terrain armored transport. And by all-terrain, we mean solid, large, flat areas. Like not all-terrain as in it can't go in a swamp, because you don't want, if you're attacking a swamp, I know it's all-terrain, but don't take that one. Like large, solid, flat areas. That's what we mean by all-terrain.
Now we'll skip Dagobah. We'll conquer on to the next planet.
Yes, not for the invasion of Dagobah, right? Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I'm saying. Like those kind of fans will watch something like this. They'll watch anything and be like, "Yay, Star Wars!" But I don't think there's any critical. There's no effort to see how much substance there is. There's no effort to understand the characters, there's no love of storytelling in that particular group of fans.
But that's okay. In their defense,
that's fine.
That's okay. That is a casual up. And if Star Wars or any franchise can be sustained on that, then more power to it. Agreed.
I don't want to knock. I guess I am knocking those fans a little bit. I don't mean to. What I'm trying to say is there is an indiscriminating, there's a part of the fan base that is very accepting of Star Wars and will like it no matter what. And you're going to find those kind of fans in Marvel. You're going to find those kind of fans in any franchise. And that is totally fine.
Not everyone has levels of attachment to a bunch of different franchises.
Fair.
And IP.
Totally fair. But on this channel, I feel like we are the types that like to analyze the story, to unpack, to look for the substance.
That's us here. Yes. But, no, definitely. But on the other hand, like, for instance, Marvel, I'm a very casual Marvel fan. So I would, of course, now I'm not going to get a tattoo because of Marvel. So I'm not that. But like my knowledge, I watched the movies. I went to the movies when they were special Marvel Phase 1 was coming out.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be part of it and see what all my friends were so excited about who were really deep into that. So I've been the casual fan. I mean, that's the casual fan of, that particular franchise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Marvel is, it's a different type of storytelling. It's a little bit more fantastical in some ways. And, it's harder to unpack those and find the kind of archetypal power and substance you might find in Star Wars. And for that reason, Star Wars will last longer than most of those Marvel films. But that doesn't mean they're bad films. I'm a big fan of Marvel. I like all their I like Iron Man 2008 through Endgame 2019. That was an excellent run.
And
possibly never run.
Very possibly the greatest achievement in filmmaking. Multiple. I mean, it's up there, arguably. Even if it's that achievement was absolutely incredible.
It is. I mean, the 23 films in a row, and pretty much all of them were at least decent, if not excellent. So and they did what most couldn't do. I feel like they mostly stuck the landing with Endgame. Infinity War and Endgame. I feel like they mostly ended that in a really satisfying way. Is it flawed? Is it perfect? It is a little flawed. It's not perfect, but it's still satisfying. And other franchises can't seem to do this.
Right. Sable Phoenix is saying 11 years of a coherent storyline that overall everybody was always happy with. They satisfied their fans. I mean, it seemed like every time a new movie came out, I saw on social media feeds that the people who liked Marvel were very happy a new movie was coming out, were enthusiastic about it, went to see it, and then were happy when they left the theater. Like, oh my God, that was great. You know, overall, for 11 years or however long. I mean, what a phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, Star Wars, Marvel and Star Wars have both fallen into the same pit. There's kind of a new morality around storytelling that I think is really disrupting people's ability to write stories from the heart. They're kind of piecing them together in a way that'll be more socially acceptable, perhaps. From even ideological in some cases, and it's and in some cases they're having people work on these stories that really aren't experienced, and it shows. So maybe our generations, Heath, I don't know if I'm Gen X. I don't know if you're late millennial or Gen X or
no. I'm early millennial.
Early millennial. Okay, yeah. The early millennial X. There's actually a subclass called Xennials, like 1981, 1982, that are real specific. But anyway, we may have just been treated on what we thought as normal. May have been a fluke in the timeline of human history to get so much great content from such great storytellers for so long. That might be the anomaly. I'm starting to think that.
I do want to say that isn't it all-terrain armored transport?
All-terrain armored transport, yes.
All-terrain armored transport, yeah. All-terrain assault train, all-terrain armored transport, and all-terrain scout.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure armored because remember their armor's too strong for blasters.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I think Ahsoka Tano suffers from complete lack of functionality, poor directing choices, poor performances, confusing, inexperienced portrayals of generals, of militaries, of national defense apparatus, of Jedis. Like, there's a lot missing from all of this. On the good side, some of the music was okay. There was times I was like, I kind of like that. I like seeing lightsabers being used again. Andor had no lightsabers, and I liked Andor. So it was fun seeing some elements of Star Wars again. It was, they're using Corellia, Home One. That was cool to hear again. So there were some nostalgic, nods that I didn't mind, but that's not enough to win me over. Like, you still got to tell a good story.
To go back with the element, there's a lot of medieval fantasy, it seemed like, in this. At the end of episode 2, Ahsoka fights some guy that looks like he's wearing Maximilian fluted arme helmet and Maximilian style armor.
Oh yeah.
And to me, that was so jarring that I knew exactly what type of armor that was. It looked like this.
Oh yeah.
Kind of fluting and stuff like this. And that was so jarring to me, even though it kind of went with why are they doing this medieval fantasy theme? I knew exactly what armor inspired that. It came clearly from our history. And I was like, why do they have, I thought it was a robot in the beginning. Like, why do they have one of the droids that's wearing Maximilian fluted armor, other than they had this inspiration from medieval fantasy for some reason? And so that completely took me out of it. Why was that there? And then he draws the whirling lightsaber. So apparently he's supposed to be some type of inquisitor, but I'm also not a fan of the Inquisitors because I didn't experience them. Yeah. I guess they showed up in the Clone Wars and Rebels, so they've been around, but they weren't a part of Rebels. They weren't a part of Star Wars that I was attached to. And the Inquisitors, to me, in general, seem like a patch. This is one of those world building patches. Whenever they show up that I've seen, it's like, well, we got this problem that we got two Sith. We got Darth Vader, and one of them is the Emperor anyway. So he's not, the Emperor's not gonna be running around fighting things. So we got Darth Vader, and we can't really use Darth Vader because he needs to be the end boss. But aren't lightsabers cool? We should have Force users because they're cool. And don't we need to have them fighting Jedi because that would be cool? So you get this idea of the Inquisitors, which just seems like a world building patch so that you can have like mini bosses or the evil Jedi that aren't evil Jedi, you know?
Yeah, like let's have them be Force users with red lightsabers who fight Jedi. Like, oh, a Sith. We don't call them that.
No, it can't be that. It's got to be something else. And so I've never liked the Inquisitors. And Sable Act says the Inquisitors suck. That's a Disneyfication.
Well, that came out of Disney. Well, by the way, I think Lucas did have something with Inquisitors. I think there's a tie-in there. However, I've never been a fan of them. Like you, Heath, I feel like they are stormtrooper Siths. You know, just these disposable villains that look menacing, look cool, but don't ever really do much. There are parts of Rebels that they're okay. There's some plot lines that work. Some of them look cool, but I've never been a fan. I just have never been a fan of the Inquisitors. Some people really like them. I think the idea of them could have been cool if they didn't have lightsabers. I love this. I would love to see perhaps maybe just this one sect of dark Force users that use all of their powers for interrogation, mind control, you know, some sort of sorcerer type, you know, small, you know, interrogation based group that are very good at what they do of getting information out of you. I think that would have been interesting. But yeah, I don't want to see red lightsabers unless it's a Sith, because even this show does that. Now with them, they have kind of orangish red lightsabers. You're cheapening lightsabers.
Well, you are completely cheap. Yes.
Yeah, like
we've been cheapening lightsabers. Now that George Lucas had that problem too. I mean, George Lucas started that when you've got, Darth Maul has a double-bladed lightsaber, and he started the arms race with lightsabers.
That's a good way to say it.
The lightsaber arms race, yes. Because even then, we've got to have General Grievous with a whole bunch of lightsabers.
That's a really good point. Now, I'll say this. I think it worked with Darth Maul, and I think over time it has sort of worked with Grievous even though it's much, 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 much weaker. But do you remember in 1999 when the trailer came out to Phantom Menace, and I remember being in theaters when the Star Wars trailer came on for Phantom Menace, and Maul does that, and then the other one goes. People are like, what? Like people were freaking out over that double lightsaber. So I feel like that one worked, but you're right. It did start an arms race because now you've got rotating lightsabers. You've got in Rebels. Do you know that in Rebels they fly? Whoa, 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 whoa. They're like helicopter blades.
Heard that. Yeah, that's just. Yeah.
Yeah, James, right? Wasn't it? It was the most intense communal moment of 1999, possibly within 5 years, plus or minus, when Maul lit that second lightsaber half. That was epic.
Right. Right. I'm saying Scott Graham says Rule of Two was a huge world building mistake on Lucas's part. Yes, it was very bad. If you want to have lots of adventures with Jedi level baddies, Inquisitors should have been Sith. So yeah, it's a ham-fisted. James says it's a ham-fisted way to deviate from the Rule of Two without deviating from the Rule of Two. World building mistake, absolutely. And then to put one of them in medieval armor from our world.
Rule of Two should have been more of a tactic, like a strategy of two. That if you want to infiltrate large groups, if you don't have the numbers for a frontal assault, if you can't take on the Galactic Republic, you use the strategy of two: a master and an apprentice. And you infiltrate. You could have done something like that to modify it to make it work.
Or say there can only be one Sith Grandmaster and his apprentice the master, or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Like the leadership has a different structure. I would have been happy with that. That would have worked great. So I was going to tell you, for Ahsoka, knowing the plot now like I do, I was going to propose a different opening to it. What I would have done with Ahsoka is, first off, the whole map thing does not work. I think it's stupid and the slow pace of like mysteriously figuring out what we're doing and dumb. I would have opened up not with Thrawn in some other galaxy. I would have opened, because right now I'm wondering if Thrawn's going to improve this series. Maybe, maybe not. Probably not, based on the first 2 episodes. And by the way, a third one just came out tonight while we're talking.
Number 3 is out. Yeah.
I doubt Thrawn will save this, but he could. Thrawn is a very imposing character. I don't trust it in the hands that he's in necessarily, but he could be quite a character. I would have opened up with the Imperial fleet somewhere, a large-scale fleet, maybe Home One, maybe Home One, the iconic Mon Calamari battle cruiser from Endor, and have the rebels in a show of force somewhere. Think times are good, and then I would have had an assault, an ambush assault from a small but well-equipped Imperial force, and have them tactically outmaneuver the rebels and destroy them. Have this major battle, and then they escape. They get out. They don't even know who did it, but we know, because we're with the Imperial. Have Thrawn attack the New Republic right away, a guerrilla-style attack. Boom! But with superior tactics, dice them up. A superior force of the New Republic flotilla or an armada of some kind. Have them dice them up. Have them get something from the New Republic. Have them capture somebody and get out of there. Hold them hostage. Now the Republic's on high alert. Secondly, you've done what you have to do in storytelling. Establish conflict up front. If Star Wars taught us anything, don't go so far back to where there's no conflict, like the Phantom Menace. The reason the Clone Wars worked and the Phantom Menace didn't is because the Clone Wars had these 2 epic sides, and they were equally matched. It was almost more like World War II. You have the Separatists and you've got the Republic, and these 2 clashed. Good stuff. Phantom Menace, I think we laughed about it before. There's a trade dispute. Got to watch out for those.
Taxation of trade routes.
Hey, watch it, man. Those in about 20 years, that could get thorny. But what I'm saying is, have Thrawn, have him come in and have a decisive victory over the New Republic right away. Let's see him at the command thing, move our ship over there, move that, have him show us him as a Napoleonic tactician, moving his forces, dicing up the rebellion, getting what he came for and getting out. You've got conflict. We know who the problem is. The Imperial Remnant, it was clear that they were led by a tactical person, because they said in Ahsoka in episode 2, or I think episode 1 or 2, everyone thought Thrawn was dead. So that's even dumber that he's alive if everyone already thinks he's dead. If everyone thinks he's dead, but he comes back and issues this assault, then rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated. So have the Republic get together, maybe in the Senate House from the prequels, with a supreme have them have a different name, maybe a president of the New Republic, whatever, discussing what to do with this new threat. It appears to be an Imperial remnant. It appears to be well led, possibly by Grand Admiral Thrawn. It poses a real threat to all of our and then while they're having this debate, a shipyard is attacked on Corellia. This guy comes, he hits, he goes. This guy's dangerous to the Republic. He's gathering systems to his. He might have dreams of bringing the Empire back. That's what I would start with. And Ahsoka's going to have to fight this guy. I would introduce a couple of Siths in this. I think I would love to have Ray Stevenson play a Sith if he was in one of my movies. God rest his soul. What a loss, by the way, in general, and also to acting, and then also to the show. But I think you start with conflict and you put all the characters on their heels right away, and you show Grand Admiral Thrawn at his best right off the bat, have the entire. And I think I would start with an opening scroll just for fun, maybe change the font color just to say this is different, maybe light blue. But I would do something to say, this is Star Wars, it's on. And Ahsoka's the Jedi on deck. So give us something, show us something. I don't know. That's what I would have done.
I like that start. Start on action, establish your big, bad, evil guy, make him threatening. Yes.
Yeah. And if he's going to deploy a couple of Sith Lords, flesh those two out. And maybe even like you said, you kind of liked both of them. I did kind of like both of them too. I like Balon more. You said you even like kind of Hatai, the girl, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like Balon more, but I think I can work with that pair.
Okay, so yeah, you could even keep that pair. I wouldn't make them mercs though. Maybe change it up. There's no maybe like you said, have no rule of two. Or you know what you want to do if you really want to throw off the Star Wars fandom? Have an attack during this attack. Maybe have 3 Sith Lords, all who are imposing and use lightsabers. Coming in. The rule of 2 is out the window just visually. If you have 3 of them coming in there, so you don't even need to explain anything. Obviously, the rule of 2 is not happening now. So
unless somebody thinks that one of them is an inquisitor because of like you can't.
No, yeah, you have to dress them in a way that's unmistakably true.
Yeah, they can't use the spinny lightsaber or whatever.
Yeah, they have to be convincing Force users, and maybe they even have the Darth title in front of their name. So anyway. That's what I was saying. Like this backs up to it, and that's why I laughed when Disney came out with the High Republic. She literally says, "This is a time of peace with no conflict." I was like, "Your stories are going to fail. There's no conflict." She's like, "The Jedi are scouting planets." I'm like, "Oh boy, not going to work." Jedis are scouting planets. Jesus, that's not even that. I don't know even what you would call that, but anyway. That's what I would do if I was going to do Ahsoka. I would start with Grand Admiral Thrawn. I'd lead off with the bad guy. I'd have great lightsaber Sith action. I'd have great Imperial Remnant battle space action, and possibly even a ground force of some kind. Star Wars is at its best when you have all 3 going on. You have a ground battle, you have a space battle, and you have a lightsaber battle.
And some kind of personal conflict or battle. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and you know what? Maybe Ezra Miller or Ezra Bridger is... Yeah, the Jedi are on a 5-year mission to go out and seek new civilizations. Even better, maybe Ezra Bridger is Darth something right off the bat. Like he's turned to the dark side. The mystery solved. Like now we know that the former characters from Rebels are going to be facing off with a Sith-empowered, Sith-enhanced Ezra Bridger. Yeah, you heard that, Sable. Ezra Miller.
Scott wants to know if we saw the original Star Wars in theaters. That
first movie I ever saw.
Oh, really?
I was 18 months old. So I can't really claim that I saw it. But my dad took me into the theater, and I watched it at 18 months old in I was born in 76. So the first movie I had ever been exposed to was Star Wars: A New Hope. But I do remember seeing Empire Strikes Back. I remember the hype. I definitely remember seeing Return of the Jedi. I remember seeing Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I grew up in a very movie-focused family, so my dad loved, my dad let me see Aliens before I, was old enough. It scared the shit out of me. So I had a cool dad like that. Like I was able to see all these movies. So Scott, did you see Star Wars at the theaters, and how old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
And yeah, I did not. I was alive after the original trilogy had already left the theater, so
yeah,
it was all VHS tapes for me.
I'm middle to late Gen X. 11th birthday, summer of 77.
Whoa.
Hard to describe how mind-blowing.
It was right from the opening sequence, like nothing before it. Yeah, trying to put myself back there to watch that. Now, like my aunt and uncles will tell me about that. And like my uncle had seen it and was just like, blown away by all of this. And then went and got my aunt and was like, you've got to see this. And, because they're brother and sister. And so they were, you've got to see this. And then took his younger sister, my aunt, she was like, oh my God. And they talk about seeing Darth Vader, the opening in the Darth Vader for the first time. And it's incredible.
Well, what's funny is, and Scott, this doesn't compensate for what you're describing, but since I was too young to appreciate it, to this day, and this has been a habit of mine for a long time, and it's a subconscious habit. I do it, and now I can't help it. Every time I watch A New Hope, I pretend I'm watching it for the first time. And I try to imagine myself, not just watching it for the first time, I try to imagine myself in 1977 with only the films up to 1977 to have to draw from. In the 70s were a very morbid, bleak, gritty, dark, realistic, hyper-realistic time in film lore. There's some great movies in the 70s, obviously, but it wasn't a very optimistic decade for filmmaking. You had The Sting, you had Jaws, what else? The Exorcist, Godfather. It was very real. It was very serious, gritty stuff. And so every time I watch A New Hope and I watch the camera come down, even the music, I'm like, what would I be thinking if I had to go all the way back to 77 and watch this for the first time? And, there's this huge fanfare. You're out in space. And then suddenly, and all that science fiction was up to that point was hokey, except for 2001: A Space Odyssey. You might have had it looked fake a little bit, models. And then suddenly there's this hyper realistic ship that flies by overhead. It's in distress. It's shooting lasers behind it. And then this giant arrowhead ship floats by and it keeps going and go. I always try to imagine what it must have been like to sit in the theater back then, wide-eyed and just experiencing and witnessing this new film. And I bet it was such a treat to all those people who got to do that.
No, I have. Scott Graham says, when I was analyzing, I've done a breakdown of, I was especially breaking down the first opening act of Star Wars, A New Hope, and going into a lot of detail on that. And yes, that's the Star Wars despecialized edition. And that's the one that I was specifically studying for story structure because I wanted to get as close as I could to the original one, exactly what was released originally, right, in order to study what actually was everybody watching that started this phenomenon. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, from what I understand, it didn't even say episode 4.
No, it didn't. No.
Yeah. And I bet we'd be a little underwhelmed by the original footage by today's standards. But it certainly seemed like, here's with an opening scroll and everything, it seems like it's that campy, Buck Rogers, not very realistic, but fun adventure, swashbuckler. And what you get is realism. And I think realism in sound, realism in sight, realism in speed and maneuverability, I think all of that coming together. And also the non-shiny droids. When you go back and look at films in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s that are sci-fi films, the droids are all chrome and shiny. Even The Black Hole, which came out in the 70s, had those chrome droids with those double guns. You look at Star Wars, here's 3PO. He's got oil dripping down. He's weathered. R2 is smeared. And I was like, this is brilliant. And then you look at the prequel trilogy and what they do. They put Captain Phasma in a chrome. I'm like, they're right back there. They're right back to what Lucas was revolutionizing in 1977. The minds of 2015 are still locked in the old sci-fi look.
And for no reason.
And I do like The Black Hole. Yeah, I put that on our list, Heath. If we ever
Black
want
Hole. Okay.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff in The Black Hole, man. I have Maximilian. Where'd I put him? No, Maximilian's up there. I have Maximilian and Vincent figurines up there. I thought Maximilian scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Well, is there anything else we need to discuss? I mean, I'm not running off to, well, I know it's tonight, but that's not even what I meant. But I'm like, I don't feel the need to go off and watch a whole lot more. I mean, I kind of felt like even after a couple of episodes of Kenobi, same kind of situation here. I mean, I'm mildly curious about Thrawn, but I can also probably hear it through the grapevine about what's going on with Thrawn.
Well, I will watch all 8 episodes. I feel compelled to. I have watched every Star Wars episode ever. Well, let me rephrase that. I did give up on The Mandalorian season 3. It's the first time I ever stopped watching Star Wars.
Season 3.
Yeah, so I watched all of season 1, all of season 2, and I watched season 3 up to the Jack Black episode, and I was out. I literally had no, and it wasn't a choice. wasn't like I'm like, I am not going to watch Star Wars. It was like, there's nothing in here for me. There's nothing here for me. I don't care. I have no care or concern to watch any more episodes of The Mandalorian. I don't think there's anything of value. Ahsoka is a little different because she is one of my favorite all-time characters. I am rooting for this show to find its wind. But the early evidence, Heath, that you and I are talking about, what's baked into the structure, what's baked into the functionality, what is baked into the filmmaking process. You're like, you've made a film. There's a lot of mistakes all across the board underneath the hood. So if that's the case, I tend to doubt they're going to get this into. They're not going to build a Ferrari with what they've got so far. At least I don't think so.
All right. Well, if we need to go back to it, let us know.
Okay, yeah. If it gets better, Heath, I'll reach out. I'll be like, hey,
okay,
Ahsoka's hitting on all thrusters, but don't count on that conversation.
Okay. Well, we've got James is talking about. We've got plenty of table talk topics. We've got plenty of table talk topics to discuss. Well, in fact, we've been making a list, so there are tons of stuff to discuss, even if Ahsoka doesn't warrant returning to, including actually next Thursday. So in 2 nights, I've got another table talk with Ray Tessie. He is the owner of Neutral Zone Studios. So he's not, Vic Mignogna built it, but Ray is now the owner. He's actually the one who owns and administers Neutral Zone Studios. So he's going to be talking to me on Friday. We're going to be talking about that set, what it means, how it operates, and stuff like that. So I'm going to be talking to him on Thursday.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
So, all right, you want to, I'll bring up that you want to give everybody a send-off. I
think everyone here knows pretty much what I've written. This is my debut novel. It's a historical fiction novel. What's really funny, if anyone takes the time to read this, I followed several tropes from Star Wars in an accurate historical fiction novel about a Byzantine empress. I have the mentor. Like, I use a lot of the tropes. So my point is that these archetypes are that versatile to apply to your stories. And book 2 is coming out. I'm in the middle of writing book 2 for her saga. And in February 2024, you guys know The Heroine's Labyrinth comes out. And I will be shouting out Heath and James Bacon in the acknowledgments, because you guys were part of it. I really appreciate it. And I think I'm going to sell that book. I think that one could make that one could be a good one. Keep your fingers crossed.
And if you're here watching, we've got on whichever channel you're watching this, I'm probably in a few hours. What I'll do is I'll take this off the Heath's Geekverse channel, but its permanent home will be here on Table Talks. If you're watching Heath's Geekverse or you're over here on the Table Talk channel, please do like the stream, subscribe to the channel. The Table Talk channel right here. In fact, I'll just drop a link in here. This is going to be the permanent home of Table Talk on YouTube. And all of the episodes are coming over there with clips and also shorts and everything like that. So please hang out in both places. The Heath's Geekverse still continues to be the home of the Morning Grind morning show. Sable and James says they were going to want signed copies.
Hey, I would be, for the launch of the book, I'd be willing to do something special for this channel. I can't tell you how grateful I am, Heath, to you in particular for even, inviting me on to your channel, and then to the whole chat. You have a great core group of people. I actually look forward to Tuesday nights to talk with you, Heath, and to talk to the chat. It's becoming a real special time of the week for me on Tuesday nights. So I appreciate it.
For me too, absolutely. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you, because I get to have these discussions with you, which I can't have with everybody else or anybody else. that you're willing to go deep and broad and deep. So
awesome.
All right, everybody. I will see everybody tomorrow morning on the Morning Grind, but then also, like I said, back here Thursday night with Ray of Neutral Zone Studios. And then also, I'm going to clip this. I'm going to make some clips and put this out on the Table Talk channel for some of the subjects that we have talked about directly. So awesome. I will see everybody later. Have a wonderful evening, and may the Force be with you.
Good night, guys. The original force be with you.
The original Force.